All those who are holding tickets outside will get in as fast as they can. I'm speaking out to you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm speaking to the crowd on the outside, who seem to be standing rather reluctant to come in, and we're going to start this very soon.
Welcome back to Worthy. I'm Ben.
And I'm John.
And it is our 50th episode, John. We made it to 50 episodes, 50 Best Picture winners. How we feeling? A little woot woot, celebrating.
Woot, woot, woot.
Celebrate the good times.
It's been crazy, honestly, just because the last, 3 or 4 episodes, I've moved out of New York, and we've been traveling. I got a new job, and you've been busy with work, and now you're moving too. And it's just like, it's been crazy time this year. I wish we could have knocked out some more episodes, but we are back. Worthy does not end. We're going to keep going until we're 92. Okay? I'm probably not going to make it that long, but we're going to try our best to get there.
Was that a Deadpool Wolverine?
Hey, I wasn't trying to date the episode too much, but yes, it may have been. Yes.
Wait, so who's Deadpool, who's Wolverine in this scenario?
God, that is a great question. I feel like I have to be Deadpool.
Yeah, I have the beard.
I'll just say some crazy shit that's no one should say out loud. That's probably why.
Yeah.
And
well, I hope we get to do this until we're 92, because that means we just the Oscars keep going. We have a reason people want to listen. So very exciting. I mean, 50 episodes is a huge accomplishment. I mean, it's been 4 years, and 4 years ago in August of 2020. So I'm dating when we're recording this. I'm sorry, everybody, but that's like when we started. So now it's like 50 episodes in. Well, 50 plus, because we have some of the offshoots and whatnot. But this is the 50th. This is the main episode. We're going to talk about the Best Picture winner, of course. Annie Hall.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I had to slip one in there, but because
You're already starting it that way. Starting it that way.
I know. I'm a bad boy. Anyways, so every 10 episodes, when it's a new decade or we close a decade, we do the Worthies, where we take the Best Picture winners and then categorize them across the popular Oscar awards and what we think they would go to of just the Best Picture winners from this past decade. So we're looking at 1968 to 1977. John, what were the 10 movies that we saw if in that 10-year time span?
Alrighty, so we start off in 1968 with Oliver. Remember, you got to say it with the exclamation point. Then we move on to 1969, Midnight Cowboy. 1970s, Patton. 1971's The French Connection. The Godfather from 1972. In 1973, we have The Sting. The following year, in 74, we had The Godfather Part 2. 1975, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Rocky for 1976. And this year's Best Picture winner, 1977's Annie Hall.
So those are the 10 Best Picture winners from the last 10 years, 10 worthy episodes. So we are going to categorize them. And the first category, John, is Best Song. Which number did you give Best Song to for the Worthies?
I went with Everybody's Talking by Harry Nilsson from Midnight Cowboy. What an absolute jam that is. But of course, for my runner-up, I had to throw in a little bit of Rocky with Gonna Fly Now, because what an iconic piece of music. Absolutely incredible. Ben, what did you give for Best Song for the Worthies?
Yeah, so I went with Gonna Fly Now from Rocky. And my runner-up was Everybody's Talking. So first, focusing on like Rocky, I think it's just such an iconic piece of music in general. Like everybody knows, like that's Rocky. And I was originally going to pick Everybody's Talking, but then I thought about, well, the song has to be like written for the movie itself to be considered best song traditionally. And Everybody's Talking was not written for the movie. It was just a song that they used and licensed for the movie. So I felt that Gonna Fly Now was the more appropriate, technically correct way of picking for an Oscar. And I just think that like theme song is so iconic. Had we included nominees, Star Wars probably would have slipped into there. But what was interesting is that neither of us picked The Godfather, which some people might say is like one of the most iconic scores. But I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like The Gonna Fly Now is pretty fantastic as is.
Yeah, best song is just hard to pick just because it's a lot of these don't even have a nominated song. Like a lot of these Best Picture winners don't have a specific like nominated song. So it's kind of difficult. I mean, there is like an alternate reality where we do this with every winner. For instance, we do like the last 10 best song winners, and then we say what is the best winner, basically. It's interesting. It's like, but everything's focused on our Best Picture winners for Worthy. But let's move on to Best Art Direction. Ben, what did you give Best Art Direction for the fourth Worthies? Fifth Worthies. Fifth Worthies. Okay. Wait, fourth.
Wait,
yeah, fifth, right?
Fifth. No, I think this would be the fourth.
It would be the fourth because of the tens.
Well, we
10,
are.
20,
No.
30, 40. No, it's five. Well, how can we do math?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I really. This is why we have a podcast. Anyways, Best Art Direction. I picked Midnight Cowboy. I felt that looking at the 10 Best Picture winners, a lot of them have very like iconic looks. I think The Godfather has a very iconic dark look, and same with part 2 of the movie. I loved One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and just like everything being centered in that hospital, but it was kind of like already there and fashioned for it. So I picked Midnight Cowboy because I felt it really captured a lot of, especially that apartment that they were staying in, really captured the essence, the grit, the grime of the story itself. And I felt like that really played a lot into some of the most like emotional scenes in the movie, and then also adding in some of the 60s vibes, especially at that party, very wacky and crazy. So that was my pick. Godfather Part 2 is my backup for that one. But John, what was your winner for Best Art Direction?
I went with The Godfather Part 2. My runner-up is Midnight Cowboy because I totally agree with you. I mean, what a masterful film. New York is definitely a character in that movie. It's hard to deny that. But The Godfather, New York is also a character in that movie in multiple different timelines. And I think, there's the iconic shot of Robert De Niro or Mr. Corleone, walking down the New York street as it's bustling and there's all this traffic and fruit stands and all this stuff. And it's just beautiful and looks so naturalistic and real. And the whole movie is just filled with like incredible art direction, and it always feels authentic. And he travels from one coast to the other to the lakes. Like the movie just traverses a lot of different aspects and a lot of different terrains. So it really showcases a lot of different art direction. So I had a big shout out to Godfather Part 2.
Yeah, and it's the New York it shows is like this old New York that like Coppola was able to recreate, which is like fantastic. And then it's like Midnight Cowboy is like the beaten up version of that old New York.
Yeah.
Very fascinating. So, but best score, the next category. John, what did you pick for the best score?
I went with The Godfather, the original. Godfather Part 2, basically one and the same when it comes to the music. Some people might get mad at me for saying that, but I love the score from The Godfather. I mean, it's iconic, and I know it's borrowed from some films beforehand, but it is just masterful. It's like you can't think of anything else but crime in The Godfather when you hear those notes. So it's truly just like one of a kind. It's one of the most recognizable theme songs from any film ever. And my runner-up is the same with Rocky. It's an incredible score. It's such a different score and so of its time, but that's what makes it so special. It really fits the movie perfectly, and it just gets the vibe going. Still to this day, there's nothing Philadelphians love than hearing the Rocky theme song.
Absolutely. Which is why it was my best song winner for the theme from Rocky. My best score winner. So this was an instance, actually, John, where you filled out the sheet a little bit before me, and I was going to pick The Godfather, but then I really thought about this one. And I really wanted to give a flavor, a little bit of honor and homage to Across the 10 if I could. And I picked The Sting for best score. The classic like ragtime feel to the songs, how the Scott Joplin era music is so like iconic and like very unique and like fun and whimsical, and really adds a certain tone to the movie that makes you buy into it more in a way. It really does set the tone in a very specific way that makes the adventure of the Sting fun, whimsical, mysterious, and it's like kind of like goofy to use the ragtime sound of music. So I thought like that just like worked really well. And I thought if I was going to pick a different movie, Rocky's a great pick, but I thought the Sting was a little bit more unique to the film itself. So that's my pick for best score.
That's a great choice. Definitely a great choice. Can't argue that one. For best editing, Ben, what did you give best editing for the 5th annual Worthies?
So this one, I had a bit of a toss-up. I was really thinking about it hard, and I went with Midnight Cowboy. I thought the experimentation of the movie, the pacing of the movie is fantastic. It really, the editing makes it so specific and really keeps the tone of the film just in a way that like makes the story like fast paced, but like you're able to like breathe it all in, but it kind of like ramps up with like Joe Buck's like anxiety as he's like battling through like everything's going through New York, and just like the cuts are so specific, especially that one scene where he's beating the guy up and it's mysterious, like did he kill the guy, did he not kill the guy, like what happened, but the cuts are so quick that you can't really tell. And I think it's just so it helps the movie get to where it is. So Midnight Cowboys was my pick, and my runner-up was The Godfather Part 2, just because of the massive weight that film had to tell between two unique and different storylines, mashing them together and making them work, plus all the other side stories, while also creating a very intense atmosphere. John, what is your pick for best editing?
I gave The Godfather Part 2 best editing because, come on, it's a masterpiece. It's amazing. They blend not only multiple stories together, there's incredible match cuts, there's just incredible seamless editing throughout this movie. It's honestly amazing the way it's been cut together and how it's not only interesting and feels new and fresh of how you tell a story with the two different timelines, but it also just matches so perfectly, and you can watch this as a viewer and understand exactly what's happening, which is really difficult to do. And my runner-up, which is a little oddball out here because it's been so long, but The French Connection was my runner-up for best editing because, man, that car chase, fucking incredible, so engaging and just gritty and felt new definitely for the time. So big shout out.
Big shout out to The French Connection. But let's move on to probably one of the categories that I would really like to hear and talk about, because we have best cinematography. John, what's your pick for best cinematography?
I went with Midnight Cowboy. You talked about how crazy and wacky the editing was and how it kind of challenged you as the viewer. I definitely think the same as with the cinematography. It's so new and it's out there, and it's so easy to say, you know, The Godfather, Gordon Willis, the very inspirational photography for a lot of people in the film industry, and something that challenged a lot of people, and it was being made. But I just love how like authentic and new and just 70s, and how raw Midnight Cowboy feels. And I don't think there's a 4K restoration out there, but I'd kill to get that because the colors are beautiful in this movie. And yeah, I just love how messy and chaotic it gets at times. It's great. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Midnight Cowboy cinematography as well, but I did go for the classic, the iconic look of The Godfather. Godfather Part 2 is my runner-up because I felt they were both on equal grounds in terms of look and style. So unique, the playing with darkness and shadows, the yellow, light that is used for a lot of these characters, and how muted colors are, but then some of the colors like an orange really pops out on the screen, the reds as well. So yeah, I love the Godfather cinematography. It's so classic and iconic. So that to me felt like the right winner. Moving on now to best screenplay, a category that maybe this is the decider for best picture. We always talk about screenplay, best picture. Go hand in hand very well, John. Who is your pick for best screenplay of the Worthies?
So I chose The Godfather. Come on. Just incredible film, and so well written, and it's such a great adaptation from the book, which is extremely hard to do, and it's only partially part of the book as well, so it's even crazier that it is as good as it is, really, because it's not even a fully adapted book. It almost feels crazy, like nowadays that wouldn't be that crazy, but looking back then to the time period, it's like, wow, I can't believe they took a book and they just took part of it to make it into a movie. I mean, just that in general is pretty insane. And then on top of it is an amazingly written film, and so much tension, so much amazing dialogues, iconic lines too. I mean, how many iconic lines come from the original Godfather? So amazing writing. And my runner-up is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, because boy, and another amazing adaptation. And I want to hear your best screenplay first, but then pass it back to me because I got some more deets.
Okay, well, my winner is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So your runner-up and my winner. To me, those group therapy scenes, the dialogue within it. I mean, when we were doing that episode, I think I wanted to quote most of the screenplay. I think the dialogue is so well written. The stories come right out of the page. There's so much like psychoanalysis you can do with all these characters just based off of the dialogue, and then add on the acting performances that bring it to life. It is a screenplay that is also, a play, and I think it can be universally used with great actors. It's really easy, I think, to dive into it. It just shows like how good of a story it is because of how diverse the dialogue is and unique it is to all these characters that balance them out super well. I think it's one of the smartest screenplays that we've talked about, that we've seen. It's one of my favorites from one of my favorite movies. So I picked One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and then The Godfather. As you said, it is incredibly adapted. It is iconic in its own right, has very, very memorable dialogue. It's a story that everyone loves and knows, so it felt like a very obvious, like, if it, like 1B to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, like 1A.
So I wanted to just talk a little bit more about Best Screenplay because the last 10 movies, as we read out in the very beginning, they all have 8 of them all have something in common, and they're all adapted. All 8, except for the last 2 films, Annie Hall and Rocky, are all adapted. And you could even maybe argue that Annie Hall is based on Woody Allen's real life, and Rocky is based on that boxer's name. I can't think of his name. The real name. I can't think of his name.
What is it?
That's where the name comes from too. Yeah,
Rocky Marciano.
Yes, Rocky Marciano, and some people would say that it's kind of
Sylvester Stallone himself.
No, not Stallone. No. So you could argue almost like they are also based on something previously, but they're not, especially according to the Academy rules. These are original films and original screenplays. So just wanted to throw that out there. I thought it was interesting, just like that the last 10 years from 1977 to 1968, it's still all been adaptations. There's been very little original work. So interesting.
So actually, there's one film that we did include, and that's a little iffy of a category. But Patton is considered original screenplay, but it's like based off of Patton's real life.
And we argued that though.
Yeah, and I would say that has to be more adapted. And you're right, because I mean, there's only been a few. Like The Apartment is original screenplay, On the Waterfront, and then An American in Paris is the first Best Picture winner to also win original screenplay. So yeah, there hasn't been that many. So yeah, good pointing that out.
So let's move on to Best Supporting Actress, where things get a little more tricky.
Yeah,
I found this to be the hardest category. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, this was the hardest just because there was very little in terms of performances, unfortunately, from a supporting actress. It is because of the time and the era, and really how supporting actresses aren't. But there are like performances that like are good that stand up, but it's just like in these Best Picture winners, they weren't driven much by like female leads or female supporting, performances. John, do you want to go first with your pick, or do you want me to take this one?
You go first.
All right. So I thought about this one really hard, and again, thinking about wanting to give some flavor and a little bit of diversity among the 10, and I was really trying to think deep. I think there was an obvious choice to maybe pick Diane Keaton in the Godfather movies, but I fundamentally don't really agree with much of Kay's character, which we talked about. I felt that wasn't a character that added much and actually kind of dumbed down the movies at times, because it was sort of like the audience itself like is her, which I didn't think was a viewpoint that necessarily needed to be there. And so I just felt like, nah, I'm not going to pick Diane Keaton just because it's obvious. I really kept thinking about it. And honestly, the one that stands out to me is Shani Wallace as Nancy in Oliver. I thought she brings this like heart to the movie. She's so sweet and endearing. I love the songs and the performances that she's in. She comes to a very unfortunate end, with Nancy within the Oliver Twist story. But I just thought she gave like such a like good supporting performance to. It wasn't our favorite movie, by any means, Oliver. But I thought that her performances, her numbers, and like her, just like general vibe of the movie really uplifted it and added a certain heart to it that really connected when in this like kind of like twisted world that Oliver is a part of. So she was my number one. And then my runner-up was Demetra Arliss in The Sting. So very short performance and appearance in the movie. We kind of talked about, too, how she's, like, credited at the beginning of the movie, but we don't see her until, like, really the final third. But she adds this, like, really unique, you know, kind of, like, person to play with Robert Redford. She's not, like, this traditional, like, you know, beauty that, like, that Redford might have, like, you know, been with and partnered up with in some of the scenes. But I thought they had great interactions, and then kind of the twist that she's the killer, I thought was, like, really cool. So it's just, like, a good performance I just wanted to shout out as well from our supporting ladies. So, but Shani Wallace, she got my supporting actress pick. John, who's your pick, though, for best supporting actress for The Worthies?
My runner-up was Shani Wallace. That's why I'm throwing that out there right away from Oliver. Agree. It's a nice little performance. Really, like I said, it's the hardest category because the Best Picture winners have not had very strong supporting actresses, unfortunately. There's not been very shining, bright performances or even characters. There's barely been any of these films, really, that like give a shining light to a supporting actress. But there is one film that I think does give the most to the supporting actress, and that is Diane Keaton as Kay Adams, Corleone. I don't care what you say, Ben. She's great in that movie. And she's great in the movie we're talking about today. So my best supporting actress goes to Diane Keaton as Kay Adams, Corleone from The Godfather Part 2. I don't care what you say.
I mean, I'm not going to say, like, you're wrong to pick that. I don't know. There's just something, again, I talked about, there's something just about that character itself that I just don't, I would have loved to have seen a different character be put in that place, but I get it for the plot purposes, and she's like there in the book itself. Just not my pick. But let's move on to best supporting actor, because this one has more picks and a lot more diversity and a pool that we could have picked from. So John, who is your pick for best supporting actor?
I went with Dustin Hoffman as Ratso from Midnight Cowboy. Come on, he's one of the most memorable characters, whether supporting or not. He makes Midnight Cowboy for a lot of people. He's like the poster for a lot of people. When they think of Midnight Cowboy, they think of Ratso, which is crazy because he's not even the main character, and he takes a little bit to even show up in the movie, and then he, spoiler, dies. So it truly is a transformation from Dustin Hoffman. I mean, coming off of The Graduate and then doing this like gross, dirty, straight, literally a rat. And it's just amazing. I mean, I just think about the way he speaks alone. I'll just randomly thinking about him walking through that cemetery from time to time. And yeah, absolutely. Ratso from Dustin Hoffman, incredible. But I have to give shout out, of course, to the one and only Robert De Niro from The Godfather Part 2. An incredible supporting actor performance, and what would probably be most people's pick for best supporting actor, wouldn't you say, Ben?
Yeah, it would. I think, again, this is another instance where you filled out the sheet. I was like, how do I cover a little bit more? Because I kind of honestly agree that Dustin Hoffman would be my pick, and he's my runner-up. And I agree that performance is so iconic. Yeah, hey, I'm walking here. Like, that is so specific. And the way that, like, Ratso is portrayed, like, you don't even see Dustin Hoffman. You see this other character. It truly is a great performance. And then the way that they were both, like, nominated as the lead in that movie, he really should have been the supporting, and he probably would have won for that performance. Unfortunately, he didn't. I forget who won that year, but it doesn't really even matter, because my best supporting actor pick is from The Godfather Part 2, but it's John Cazale. So John Cazale, Fredo Corleone. I think when we talked about it, his performance in that boathouse scene where he is just bent over this chair, he just looks like dead already. He knows what he's done. He knows he's fucked up. I could have been something, doing that. I could have been somebody. I could have made a contender kind of speech. It was, he wanted the responsibility. He wanted to prove to his brother that, like, he was passed over. It is so good. He is a phenomenal actor, and we're going to talk a little bit more about him again as well in our next episode, The Deer Hunter, which I'm very much looking forward to. And he does come to a very sad ending in his life, which we'll cover. But yeah, Cazale, just thought in that movie, I was surprised he didn't win, supporting actor. And because De Niro is so iconic in playing the young Corleone, like, and because it's in Italian, because he doesn't really say too much, because it's so much physical acting, like, De Niro is this, like, very great performance. But then in this, like, what's in the true story with Michael, like, Fredo is the supporting actor to like really make it go and really keep the engine going. So yeah, shout out John Cazale, supporting actor. But Dustin Hoffman, of course, is just iconic in Midnight Cowboy.
All right, moving on to Best Actress. Ben, for the 5th annual Worthies, who did you give Best Actress to?
So this one was a no-brainer to me. Louise Fletcher in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. She is like Satan reincarnated into Nurse Ratched. It is unbelievable. She is so good. I mean, again, we just like listen to that episode of how we oozed about her. I oozed about that performance. The way that Louise Fletcher, kind of had to fit herself within this group of men, but like was sort of off to the side, like couldn't really be a part of it because she had to be the villain, so she had to be a little reserved. But then still deliver this performance that is so gels so well, especially in those group therapy scenes. And of course, the screenplay really helps what she has to play with, the characterization of it. So I love Louise Fletcher in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. She absolutely deserves that win. And my runner-up, Diane Keaton and Annie Hall. We'll talk about Annie Hall and Diane Keaton a little bit. It's a performance that I can't ignore. I can't ignore. She is good. I still don't think it's a performance the way that like other do. I understand the costuming is like very iconic. Maybe it's just Diane Keaton that I just don't love because I rejected her in the Godfather movies. It's just, I don't know, man. There's just something that like about her that just doesn't like gel well with me. So maybe that's it. But I also can't deny like, yeah, she is like very good in Annie Hall. It is a performance that like many love, and I can appreciate that. But it's not something that's like, yeah, that's my pick. Like if I had to look at like all the Best Actress wins, I don't know like really where she would rank. I don't know if she would even go in the top half if I had to really pick.
So we did it again. We flipped it on its head. My runner-up was Fletcher as Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because, come on, it's an iconic performance. It is amazing, but I love Diane Keaton as Annie Hall, the titular character. She's amazing in that movie, and I don't need to say anything else because I'll be gushing about her very soon. So, Ben, let's move on to Best Actor. Who did you give your Best Actor worthy to?
So we're gearing up for potentially a big 5 win because my Best Actor winner is Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest got screenplay, gets actress. Now it's Best Actor for Jack Nicholson as R.P. McMurphy. Again, it's the screenplay, the actor, like just the combination is so iconic. Just what he's able to do with that character, from not just like the talking, but the physicality with it, the emotions he gets out with just his like facial expressions. It's just a performance that you really just can't deny as like one of the best that we've ever really seen. It's like Jack Nicholson, like I hate to say like he's crazy and he's like, because movies about people in an insane asylum, but how can you not go? It's this performance that just jumps right off the screen because it's so wacky and out there, but yet so sinister in many ways. So yeah, Jack Nicholson to me is the winner, but in a very, very close second. And I was really sad that I couldn't pick it because of Nicholson's performance. But Jon Voight in Midnight Cowboy as Joe Buck is the thoughts that he has to go through, the dichotomy of like what it means to be a man versus like who he is. We question like, well, what is he actually? Disguising himself in many different ways. And as Jon Voight is just, I can't deny how great he is in Midnight Cowboy. One of my favorite personal performances, but both are two of my favorites that we've watched. So John, who is your pick for Best Actor for the 5th Worthies?
I also went with Jack Nicholson. They kind of matched up and locked in on this one here because truthfully, it's one of those performances that just feels so fresh and unique. And it's a performance where you're constantly like looking into it very deeply and you're like staring at his face and you're like, is he pretending? Is he really this crazy? Is he not playing? And obviously a lot of that has to do with the script, but it all comes down to Nicholson being able to pull it off. And he does with flying colors, and he can jump from, working with the other people in the asylum, and then also can jump right back to being like the antagonist to Nurse Ratched. He's so good at like flip-flopping and then being the free-loving spirit with his prostitutes and his alcohol, and he's just a very complex character. So boom, already very interesting.
Right.
And then Jack Nicholson is just one of the most like dynamic, fascinating, and intriguing actors to watch. He always does something that is like you can't look away. He just has the most expressive eyes. I really think it comes down to his like way he moves his body and his very expressive eyes that you just like cannot stop looking at. And then my runner-up is the iconic Rocky Balboa performance from my boy Sly.
I love this. Thank you.
Love Rocky, and I chose this specifically. I almost went out of the way to make him my chosen worthy because I think when we look at the script, as we talked about in our last episode for Rocky, it doesn't, when you read it on paper, it's like, oof. I think we would all agree, like, this is not the best script. Like, some of the things the characters say, it sounds so goofy and stilted. Yet when you watch it, you're like, of course, that's what Rocky Balboa would say. What a weird goof of a human being. And I think he only pulls it off because it's Sylvester Stallone. It's his accent, his voice, the way he carries himself. It's an amazing performance. I don't care what anyone has to say. I love Rocky Balboa, and I love Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, and I think that I agree it's great. But we got a lot of great performances. Just to kind of like recap like what we were trying to like pick from some of these lead performances. We had George C. Scott and Patton, which wow. And then you also Gene Hackman in The French Connection, which is another wow. The Godfather, obviously Marlon Brando, Vito Corleone. The Sting, could have been Paul Newman, Robert Redford. Neither of them won, but still those are really great performances. Part 2. Could have Godfather Part 2, you could have picked Al Pacino. Like, there are so many really phenomenal performances. So I think the ones that we're highlighting right now, especially Jack Nicholson, that all of them are great. But yeah, it just shows how good Jack Nicholson, his performance is. So before we get into Best Director, I want to twist this up a little bit because we both have the same runner-up, and I thought that it was really interesting that was your runner-up as well. So I figured let's just both give a shout-out right now to our runner-up Best Director winner, which was John Schlesinger for Midnight Cowboy. John, I'll let you start first for John Schlesinger and why he's our runner-up.
Yeah, I kind of hit on it for some other mentions of Midnight Cowboy. I think it really is just how like earnest and unique the film is. You're talking about like a perspective of a character that feels like it's pushing the boundaries of not only culture at the time, but also especially filmmaking, and especially the films that are getting nominated for Best Picture. And then you find all the details out when you learn more about the movie and how Jon Voight had like barely been an actor. He's very fresh and he's new, and he's able to take an actor like that and then mix it with Dustin Hoffman, who's already been around. He's way more famous than Jon Voight is at the time, and he's able to manage those, balances those relationships, and create a movie that's not only feels new and fresh, but it's extremely compelling and emotionally raw and beautiful. And truly, out of like all the last 10 films, it's probably the film I still think about the most. So tell me, Ben, why you gave it the runner-up, but not what you chose for Best Director.
Yeah, this one was really tough just because I loved Midnight Cowboy. I love the style, the choices that Schlesinger makes, how he crafts this world that the two characters are interacting, how big it feels, but yet how empty and intimate it is between the two characters. I really just appreciated the cuts that he chose, the angles, just every single artistic choice, adding in the coaching of those performances. It's a great combo. I feel like unfortunate that I didn't pick it. Again, we had a lot of like good options from our Best Director choices, but yeah, John Schlesinger really killed it for me. But John, everyone wants to know what did we pick? Was our actual winner of the worthies for Best Director? This could determine who wins Best Picture for us. So John, who is your pick for Best Director?
My Best Director went to Francis Ford Coppola for The Godfather. I mean, come on. There's not much to be said. It's a masterpiece. Everyone doubted him. I think when you think of The Godfather, you just think of this crime gangster masterpiece. But if you really know the backstory, if you go and watch, what's the name of that great Paramount Plus show, Ben? Do you remember?
What was that?
Think about it. Or look it up while I'm talking.
I'm going to look it up.
So if you haven't watched this great show on Paramount Plus called The Offer, just went to my head.
The Offer.
It is a wonderful show about the making of The Godfather. So check that out, and I think that'll give you more appreciation not only for the film, but for Francis Ford Coppola, the incredible filmmaking that took place. And I think it also shows how just complex it can be to be a film director. You're not always fighting with actors. Sometimes you are. Sometimes you're fighting with the people on set that you work with that are technicians. Sometimes you're fighting with your producers. Sometimes you're fighting with the whole head of the studio. And sometimes, like when you make The Godfather, you fight with the actual mafia. So I think it's a great representation to pick for Best Director because it's a truly complex film that he pulled off with amazing performance, amazing everything, and it seemed very complicated process to do it. So, huge shout out to Francis Ford Coppola. Ben, who did you give Best Director?
Yeah, I mean, I can't deny Francis Ford Coppola's direction in The Godfather. It is really great, but it does feel a little messy when you really think about like everything that happened. And not to like knock that against him, but it does feel like if I'm going to pick and try and differentiate like what's the best direction, to me it's Milos Forman for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I keep on going back to those group therapy scenes, how well balanced they are, the characters, the coaching of those performances, and then creating this world within this like tiny confinement space. It's so personal and again, I'm using the word intimate, like I used for Schlesinger with Midnight Cowboy, that is entirely unique, and it's just it has this like it has this auteur spirit without being overtly auteur and specific. It uses every aspect of filmmaking from the most basic level to perfection, and it shows how like simple it can be, but yet how masterful as well. I just love that movie, love the performances and the screenplay, and again, you need someone to bring it all together. And Milos Forman's vision for it. I mean, he won the Oscar for it for that film specifically. So to me, he's the best director out of the 10 that we could have picked. So John, now it is time for the Best Picture reveal for the Worthies, for the fifth Worthies, the fifth movie that we think is the best of the best. John, who did you pick for Best Picture of the Worthies?
So I tried to keep this a little bit of a secret, but as we're going on, I'm like, oh, this is kind of getting obvious. So first, I'll give my runner-up as The Godfather. What else is there to say about that masterpiece? But my favorite film, my favorite Best Picture, starting from 1968's Oliver all the way to the most recent Annie Hall in 1977, is Midnight Cowboy. I've gushed about this movie. Ben has gushed even more, but it is absolutely, like I said, the movie I think about the most since watching the last 10 here, and I just love this movie. I think about Everybody's Talking. I like that song plays in my head randomly. I think about Jon Voight's character and Ratso, and if only Ratso just got to go to freaking Florida like he was supposed to. Those characters like kind of live in my head as if they were real in a weird way. And that doesn't happen often. I think that's very rare when it comes to like art or movies in particular. So I had to go with Midnight Cowboy because it's just truly, it's very original for its time. It still feels like fresh and relatable and people would understand it now. So go watch Midnight Cowboy. If you haven't watched that episode of ours, go listen to that. But definitely spend the time and sitting down to watch Midnight Cowboy because I don't think you'll regret it. Ben, do you agree?
Yeah, so I do agree with this. I think Midnight Cowboy is the best picture of the last decade of films that we watched. It's kind of hard to deny. I know I was picking a lot of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I know it was like, wow, he's just going to keep following One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But no, it swept in there, Midnight Cowboy for me. And I know it seems kind of odd to like maybe not pick Schlesinger then for director or not Jon Voight for best actor. I understand all that. But there's just something about Midnight Cowboy versus One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is my runner-up, that it just edges it a little bit more in terms of the mystique, the kind of what the movie's talking about. I think just an overall like movie put together, Midnight Cowboy just really stuck out to me. And again, like I gave it a 100. I gave it the most perfect score I could give, one of the few. I know like we've tossed around the 100. I think you gave The Apartment a 100. So my 100 so far went to Midnight Cowboy. And then, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was a 99. So it's like they're both neck and neck. But yeah, there's just something about Midnight Cowboy that, again, it just sticks with you throughout the entire time that is just so perfect in many ways. So yeah, Midnight Cowboy, the best picture winner of the fifth worthies for the two of us. Just to kind of recap where else the other movies that we picked for this honor, the best of the best. So our first one we actually agreed on, John, and it happened one night for the first decade. So we both agreed there for our, like the 20s, 30s Best Picture winner. The second worthies, I picked Casablanca. You picked The Best Years of Our Lives. Two great movies. The third worthies we split again. I had On the Waterfront. You had Bridge on the River Kwai. And then for the fourth one, we both went together on it when we picked The Apartment as the best picture between the two of us. Both of us had picked Lawrence of Arabia as the runner-up, but The Apartment as the winner. And then we both agreed on Midnight Cowboy. So 3 out of 4 worthies agreeing on it is pretty, I would say it's pretty good between us. We share one brain, John. We are one person, one brain, one thought. Or
hive mind.
Or is our hive mind going to differ? Because we do have to talk about Annie Hall, the Best Picture winner of 1977, John. So let me ask that question to you. Is Annie Hall worthy of the Best Picture award of 1977?
Annie Hall. Alvy Singer, a divorced Jewish comedian, reflects on his relationship with ex-lover Annie Hall, an aspiring nightclub singer, which ended abruptly, just like his previous marriages.
Comedian Alvy Singer is trying to understand why his relationship with Annie Hall ended a year ago. Growing up in Brooklyn, he vexed his mother with impossible questions about the emptiness of existence, but he's precocious about his innocent sexual curiosity, suddenly kissing a classmate 6 years old and not understanding why she was not keen to reciprocate.
Annie and Alvy, in a line for the sorrow and the pity, overhear another man deriding the work of Federico Fellini and Marshall McLuhan. Alvy imagines McLuhan himself stepping in at his invitation to criticize the man's comprehension. That night, Annie shows no interest in sex with Alvy. Instead, they discuss his first wife, who he kept at a distance for no good reason. His second marriage was to a New York writer who did not share his enthusiasm for sports and was unable to reach orgasm.
With Annie, it is different. The two of them have fun cooking a meal of boiled lobster together. He teases her about the unusual men in her past. They had met playing tennis doubles with friends. Following the game, awkward small talk leads her to offer him a ride uptown and then a glass of wine on her balcony. There, what seemed a mild exchange of trivial personal data is revealed in, quote, mental subtitles as an escalating flirtation. Their first date follows Annie's singing audition for a nightclub. After their lovemaking that night, Alvy is a wreck while Annie relaxes with a joint.
Soon, Annie admits she loves Alvy, while he buys her books on death and says that his feelings for her are more than just love. When Annie moves in with him, things become very tense. Eventually, Alvy finds her arm in arm with one of her college professors, and the two begin to argue about whether this is, quote, flexibility they had discussed. They eventually break up, and he searches for the truth of relationships, asking strangers on the street about the nature of love, questioning his formative years, and imagining a cartoon version of himself arguing with a cartoon Annie portrayed as the evil queen in Snow White.
Alvy attempts to return to dating, but the effort is marred by neurosis and an episode of bad sex that is interrupted when Annie calls in the middle of the night, insisting that he come over immediately to kill a spider in her bathroom. A reconciliation follows, coupled with a vow to stay together come what may. However, their separate discussions with their therapist make it evident there is an unspoken and unbridgeable divide. When Alvy accepts an offer to present an award on television, they travel to Los Angeles with Alvy's friend Rob. However, on their return trip, they agree that their relationship is not working. After losing Annie to her record producer, Tony Lacey, Alvy unsuccessfully tries rekindling the flame with a marriage proposal. Back in New York, he stages a play of their relationship, but he changes the ending. Now she accepts.
The last meeting between Annie and Alvy is a wistful coda on Manhattan's Upper West Side, after they've both moved on to someone new. Alvy's voice returns with a summation. Love is essential, especially if it is neurotic. Annie sings Seems Like It's Old Times, and the credits roll.
Annie Hall was directed by Woody Allen.
Written by Woody Allen and Marshall Brickman.
Produced by Charles H. Jaffe and Jack Rollins.
Music by R.D. Butler.
Cinematography by Gordon Willis.
Editing by Wendy Green Brichmont and Ralph Rosenblum.
Art direction by Mel Bourne.
And costume design by Ruth Morley.
Annie Hall starred Woody Allen as Alvy Singer.
Diane Keaton as Annie Hall.
Tony Roberts as Rob.
Carol Kane as Allison.
Paul Simon as Tony Lacey.
Shelley Duvall as Pam.
Janet Margolin as Robin.
Colleen Dewhurst as Mom Hall.
And Christopher Walken as Dwayne Hall.
Annie and I broke up, and I still can't get my mind around that. You know, I keep sifting the pieces of the relationship through my mind and examining my life and trying to figure out where did the screw up come, you know? And a year ago we were in love, you know, and I just, and it's funny, I'm not a morose type. I'm not a depressive character. You know, I was a reasonably happy kid, I guess. I was brought up in Brooklyn during World War II.
So, I feel like we have to have a little bit of a debate, maybe just a little convo about what people call the art versus the artist. Because we're talking about a Woody Allen film.
Yes.
This is a tricky topic for some who just don't even want to hear that dude's name or doesn't want to talk about him, wants to remove him from cinema history or just film history in general, whatever it may be. So right off the top, I just want to hear like your opinions on the concept of art versus artist. And if you don't know what that concept is, it's the concept and debate that examines the relationship between an artist's work, their personal life, behavior, or character. So you're essentially comparing the art they produce, maybe what they represent in that art and what comes out of that art versus the actual artist, what they do in their personal life, how they act in public, and so forth. So Ben, what's your opinion on the art versus artist concept?
I think it's a very tricky, slippery slope because there's some instances where you want to not factor in the outside influence onto art that you really like. I think that it is really hard to express like that, like, well, I still enjoy this like very much. I think that and people look at that as like the wrong opinion. I don't think of it as a wrong opinion, but I think there are some things that are very hard to look past. And kind of with my issue, I think it's like, again, case by case, which I even hate having to use that because some of these things that artists have done are just deplorable and awful. But in the case of Woody Allen, it's not just the alleged child molesting, the marrying your partner's adopted daughter who is underage and you're well into your 50s and she's 16, 17. Like it's like that is like truly awful, but it's then also the characters that are in his movie. It's the amount of sex, the amount of gender role conversations, the amount of movies and lines that he has in not just Annie Hall and other movies. Manhattan is another one where he is dating underage girls, where the talk of underage girls, of older guys, is like brought up very casually in these like comedic ways, and like the crux of like so many of these movies that he has, and it's disturbing to me. And it's like this person, the way that I read it and come across, and again, like I don't know all the details, so it's like this isn't what this like conversation is about of like, well, did he do it or not? It's well, there's all these allegations out there. We do know about his current wife and how that all came about. And then we also have a movie like Annie Hall with a character like Alvy Singer that he says is not autobiographical. But then I hear Tony Roberts give an interview on another podcast called Unspooled. They interviewed him, and he's like, how could you deny that's not Woody Allen and that character? Because he knows him personally. He's a friend. And so it's like Woody Allen may want to deny he's that guy, but it's like that's who he is. It's a consistent character, consistent outlook in many of his movies that these male characters have, and the objectification of women, the amount of sex that is like used in his movies as like a haha, but also like kind of like a necessity to these like characters. So it's like it's really hard. And again, that's why I'm saying it's like a case by case, where it's like he did something awful, there are these allegations out there, and then we also have the proof in his art that it's like a little too similar, if that makes sense. So I want to hear your thoughts on that, and also your take on the art versus artist debate.
Yeah, it's funny because this is like a debate that we've had probably like as long as we've known each other, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we had this with Cimarron, we were talking about race, and it's really hard to talk about race, and because it is like a very sensitive subject, like Gone with the Wind, but it's like now this is like deplorable. It's like happening like right now, like Woody Allen's still around type of thing. Like he's still making movies.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of, and I think when you look at it, you can break it into like two separate categories. There's people that have been like convicted of an actual crime, whether there's allegations, rumors. That's like the complete other opposite of the spectrum, right? There's a lot of people that have been accused of doing horrible things, but they've never been convicted of a crime. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure that's like Woody Allen in this case. I'm pretty sure that's even like recently Kevin Spacey as well. Both have been convicted of crimes, but then proven not guilty. I know that's the case for Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, with Woody Allen, it again, like I'm not like I know everything about it, but my understanding is that Mia Farrow didn't want to put the child essentially through the process, like going through a trial and being, put on the stand to talk about it, and that was also another shared view by like a state prosecutor. So they didn't put her through it, which like makes it so the allegations go away for Woody Allen, like legally, but it's like still there, and there's still a lot of clouded information.
Sure. So I wanted to put that out there because there's like different perspectives on this, right? There's like people that are actually like criminals that have been convicted and that have been punished or will be punished or whatever it may be. And then there's people that like there's not really exactly concrete evidence. There's maybe like hearsay, other stories explaining things that might have happened. So, and I'm not saying like one is more right than the other. And my argument, honestly, is almost like the entire opposite of Ben. His is like pick and choose, and I'm like, no. It is art versus artist. I don't care what that person did. I don't care who they are outside of it. Even Woody Allen as the actor, the main actor and director of this film, the writer of this film, I don't care. I don't care what he did outside of this movie. I don't care what news stories it is. Maybe I'll think about it while I watch a movie occasionally if that's really in the back of my mind. But I don't think about that. I don't think about that when I listen to Michael Jackson. I don't think that about a lot of different artists that have done horrible, horrible things. And I just kind of fully have always stood by that. I've always felt like the work should stand on its own. Does that mean you can't criticize Woody Allen and for this horrible accusations and all the stuff that he's been accused of? Like, no, you can go feel free to do that. I would do that. That's gross. Would never support that. Obviously, it's insane. But to me, it's always been like a separation, and you can't pick and choose. You just have to like choose. You're either like, nope, you can't separate it, or yes, you can separate it. And that's kind of like the line that I've always drawn. I've always kind of like stayed onto that. And, there's always different analogies people use and make, and there's exceptions that people always make. And that's where I've always kind of drawn the line. It's like, there's no exceptions for me. There's no picking and choosing here. And I think a lot of it comes down to, it's like, this is a much more popular term in the 21st century because we know so much more now. It's so much easier to get information. Back even in 1977 when this movie was made, you had to read the newspapers. Maybe you read a book. Maybe you like could find it in a library where you could learn that, let's say Woody Allen was already known to be a bad guy back then. You would only know that from hearsay, from friends, or from like books. Now you can go on the internet and immediately get this information so quickly and know this. And you could be on your phone while you're watching Woody Allen's Annie Hall and be like, ooh, did you know he did this? Like, fuck Annie Hall, I'm turning it off. So there's like an immediate reaction and understanding from that information where you could make that judgment like immediately. Yeah. So I think it's changed a lot in the recent times because of that, because we have so much easily accessible information. And really at the end of the day, I think to sum it up for me is that I always have kind of separated the two. And I'll use it, and we're talking about a very like Jewish director when it comes to Woody Allen, some might even call this like a Jewish film, but I'll take it the complete opposite far end spectrum where, and this might be inappropriate, but I'll say it as like an extreme. I think I've always used this as a jokingly extreme. When you look at someone like Hitler, one of the worst human beings ever on this planet, I know Ben is like, where is he going with this?
Where is John going with this?
He didn't get into art school, but you pull up a painting by Adolf Hitler, don't tell anyone that it's by Adolf Hitler and show them and say, is this a good painting? Is this a bad painting? Most people would say, that's a pretty good painting. Like, that painting looks pretty good. It's the fact that you don't know it's by Adolf Hitler that will then may change your expectations entirely. But it is just a simple example of this is a horrible human being that did some of the most atrocious shit on the planet, but he can also be an artist that makes cool looking things. Both can exist, you know?
I get that. And, you know, that's an extreme example. The example I would have used, honestly, and I think it's like a closer comparison, is like a Roman Polanski, where, again, deplorable act, underage, you know, doing stuff with underage children. But his movies, he's not in them. They're, you know, Rosemary's Baby, Chinatown, The Pianist are very like not personal stories. Although The Pianist is, you know, he was in the Holocaust, he is a survivor. But at the same time, like, it's not like him in those movies. Where with Woody Allen, he's very much in it. Like, it's like when you're in it, like the way he is and what he's saying and doing, it's really hard to deny. And, you know, another, you know, like with Louis C.K., like, man, those episodes of Louis, sometimes he does put himself in these situations that are a little like uncomfortable, and you hear about the acts that he did, and you're like, that seems to hit a little too close to like what I'm seeing within the art. Which is why it's like, I hate to say case by case, because I somewhat do agree that you should separate it at times, because sometimes the art does speak to it in different ways. But then when it's like yourself within the art, and that is so present, you know, if I wanted to go with your Hitler analogy, like, because I'm assuming his art had nothing to do with the depiction of the death to Jewish people, you know, I'm sure they're like fine, like landscapes, but yeah, it's like, because Woody Allen's so involved in the art, it's like I can't separate that. If, you know, it just, to me, it's just too hard to separate, because we see the character in multiple movies, in multiple performances of his, in multiple screenplays he's written, and then still the allegations match up to like some of the disgusting stuff that is in the films.
Yeah, it would be like as if Hitler himself was like a bunch of self-portraits, and it's like, oh, you then, based on the information that you're receiving from what you're looking at, you know it's by him. My example was more of like the mysterious, like you can watch this and then have no idea, and then retrospectively be like, oh, I fucking hate that. Like, I hate that now.
and I think, and you know, I don't want to spend the whole time talking about this, because we should give the movie its like fair discussion, but like, I think because of being born and growing up in the time post allegations and knowing about it, before watching really Annie Hall for like the first time to have understanding, it again is hard to separate the art and the artist, because we know it happened. Like growing up, like I understood like Woody Allen did something, and then again, just like the marrying and having a relationship with like your partner's adopted daughter is just like, what the fuck, man? Like that, it to me, that's just like the most like undeniable thing about it is just like how disturbed that is. So yeah, I don't want to, you know, I know we can like go back and forth about this. I think we have a common ground that like it really should be like separated in like an unfortunate way almost. But when you have the art in front of you, it's like hard to deny what you're seeing sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just kind of at a standstill. I don't even know if I would call it common ground, because it is like pretty opposing still. But that's not a problem. I mean, I think that's why conversations like this are important, because most people don't have rational conversations about this kind of thing. It's just pointing fingers and getting mad, or calling, like me being called a pedophile or whatever you want to call me because I love Annie Hall. It's like, fuck it, do it. I don't fucking give a shit. It's not true, and this movie is amazing. I don't really care what you have to say, you know? At the end of the day, I think it's like, it's not a skill, because of course in the back of my head, maybe here and there I would think about it, but it is almost like an active thing you have to do if really you're like that disturbed or fucked up by an accusation or what it may be. But I think it's up to the viewer at the end of the day, you know, like whether you just don't even want to hear it because of those horrible things, or you just will move on. Like there's people that may like our podcast, but like won't listen to this episode just because it's Woody Allen's episode and it's about his film. And that's fine. I mean, like, just choose whatever you want to support for whatever reason, you know. I always speak with your dollar is what I always like to say. But yeah, I think I'll always stand at this art versus artist debate. And it's an interesting debate. Let us know what you think about the art versus artist concept.
Yeah. So let's get into it, because we still have, I think, differing opinions about the movie itself, because when we do think, because you love it. I know I can see it off of you. I can hear it that you just love the movie. But my question is like, and I think this is my big crux of the whole argument is like, everyone cites Annie Hall as like this like game changer of a movie, the breaking of the fourth wall, the different comedy that's in it, the kind of like realist, like honest, like conversations. To me, maybe it just doesn't jump out as like groundbreaking and game changing as other Best Picture winners, as another movie when we get to the Oscar ceremony, we'll talk about it, that I think should have been here because of their own game changes in other movies. I don't see this movie as like a big game changer. So do you view it that way, or is it for other reasons you really enjoy this movie?
Well, I mean, I enjoy it for a lot of different reasons, but I do think it's a game changer. I think it's not because, there's fourth wall breaking. I think it's because it's a mixture of a lot of different things. It's really earnest and truthful writing. It's very honest, and at times it's almost like elitist because Woody Allen's character is a snob, straight up. He is not, for a lot of people, is not a very likable character, and that's fine. Like, not likable characters are really funny, and his character as Alvy is very funny. He is such a goofy guy from the opening moments where he's talking directly to the camera as if he is a comedian, like his character is, and just telling us a joke and bringing us back as if it's therapy. I don't think it's the fourth wall breaking. I mean, I gushed about this movie called Alfie from 1966, 10 years before this movie, even more than 10 years before this movie. Michael Caine starred in Alfie, which is like a British film about this very like swagged out guy who just loves to sleep with women all throughout London. And it all throughout the movie, he's breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience. And this is not the first time, I don't think, even that fourth wall was broken in film. But this is the first time it's coming up in like our Best Picture winner here. So then that's kind of what people look at as being original. But I think that's only like one aspect of it. Like, I think it's definitely original for the time. I think a lot of Americans didn't see Alfie back in 1966, or maybe they forgot about it. But the movie does a lot of different things. When you're talking about the two characters, talking voiceover about what they're actually thinking instead of saying, there's a lot of tropes that come out of this movie that have been replicated then in a lot of romantic comedies. And I love romantic comedies. I think this is like the next step in evolution of romantic comedies. And even like when we go all the way back to like It Happened One Night, like sets the framework and the foundation. And this movie is like an amazing companion piece to that, as it like flips it on its head and really focuses on point of view. And I think that's really where this film is so unique. It's point of view driven in a way that like I don't think we've ever seen in a Best Picture winner, and rarely films nail a point of view down like this. I think it's extremely original, and just you feel like you're in Alvy's shoes, and it really captures the essence of dating. And obviously, you live in New York now. I used to live in New York. I think it captures New York wonderfully, and it's beautifully shot by Gordon Willis. I mean, honestly, when people talk about not liking this movie, I just immediately always think it just has to do with Woody Allen. I watch this movie and I'm like, how could you not like this? Like, it's funny. The characters are interesting. They're so complex. There's so many funny jokes and situations you get put in. Like, there's so much relatable about this movie. And this is like the movie from the very beginning when we started Worthy 4 years ago that you constantly were like, oh, wait till we get to that movie. Wait till we get to that movie. Wait till we get to that movie. And I already seen this movie. I watched this when I was like probably in high school, and I loved it then. And I probably love it even more now, honestly. So Ben, take over the floor. Why is this the movie that you've always hyped up as hating so much, excluding Broadway Melody, because that movie is an actual piece of garbage. Sorry to the filmmakers
What about Gigi? I mean, like that one,
Yeah, you talked about Gigi a lot, but Gigi's more just like, cringy from like the core of its being. I don't think Annie Hall is cringy at all.
I gave it a 15 at the time. Look, man, it's funny how you bring up like the comedy as being so unique, and like everyone tells like joke after joke. I find it, and maybe it's just the age I'm at, the perspective I have of the world, the time we live in, that I just don't find, like, I find it to be like so many bits. It's trying to do bit after bit after bit. And to me, as I've gotten older, I think it's actually become less and less funny. yeah, especially with this viewing, I like wasn't really laughing. I was like, okay, like yeah, the cocaine thing, like haha, he like, but you know, sees all over it. So like that didn't land as much for me. And again, I used to, when I first watched the movie, maybe the first like 2 times, I used to think Annie's the problem. I used to think that she was the problem, and she was the kind of like what the heat driving her insane. And again, I was young when I first, I was like in high school. It's like when I first started hearing Annie Hall is like great movie, like XYZ. Older, matured, more mature, I don't know, maybe a little bit more mature, but like enough to like kind of see like, wow, he is like this huge issue. And that's the things that he's like agonizing over, the shit he's saying, the stuff that like he like pushes to the side, and this like just the way he talks about it, it just like it really, again, it's like it feels like Woody Allen talking about it. I know what Woody Allen did, and so it's like hard to separate it. Going to other technical points, like with Gordon Willis's cinematography, I love the shot at the South Street Seaport of like the Brooklyn Bridge, and they're like holding each other. Like that is a very beautiful shot. If you've ever been down to the South Street Seaport, seeing the bridge like from that, it's a beautiful thing. You can't deny it. It's really hard to like not get that. But I actually didn't find the cinematography in this movie to be like, whoa, like with Gordon Willis with like The Godfather type of thing. And there are some like insert shots of like, what are we like looking at, like what is going on, and it is like fine. Like ultimately the cinematography, like technical aspects of it is like just fine. Yes, I can appreciate some of the longer takes, like the one shot where they're like walking down the city block. I can appreciate that, and I can find it to be like well crafted, but still at the end of the day, it's the subject matter. It's like I like almost want more, and because I can't agree with like Alvy's like perspective, and maybe it's just him agonizing, him trying to figure it out, and like that's what's so at the forefront of it. But it's like, again, so like pushed to the front of it, and it just is like, it turns me off a little bit. And then adding on the, besides his like his views of sex, women, how he tries to be this like machismo man, but he's like this like dweeby guy. It's like I get very confused by it. It's the like the hating of it, and it's like kind of the things that, I mean, we've talked about it before, when it comes to like film discussion, when it comes to like people that we were around in college, the way shit gets talked about, that's like this hating on the mainstream, this hating and on others' views, this like denial that like if it's not my opinion, if you don't agree with me, then it's just so wrong. It's like you can't even consider it. It's like his character is constantly doing that. And it's like exhausting for me, because I just, again, it's like those are people I don't agree with ever, because I want it to be open and conversation. I don't have to agree with your point, but to like shut it down immediately, like with the Marshall McLuhan scene, it's just like he's agonizing that someone has an opinion of something he doesn't agree with, and he's just going to shit on it. He's going to constantly make these like Godfather references because it's tongue in cheek, because he's Diane Keaton as part of like the Godfather cast with him. And it's like, again, it's like constant shitting on stuff, the constant bit stuff that's just, it's exhausting, after a while.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like an asshole, but it's kind of the point. Like, he's kind of a piece of shit. Like, that's kind of the whole point of the movie, and that's why it's funny. Like, he is obnoxious, but he is
that's
witty
what I don't
and
find
annoying.
Funny, though.
Like
that. Like that's what I don't find funny though, is like the being obnoxious. Like I get that it's the point.
Yeah, no, I think it's hilarious. And you're pointing out like one of the funniest scenes in the movie, the breaking the fourth wall, bringing in the director and proving him wrong. Don't we all think we could do that? Yes. First time I watched this as a kid, I was like, oh my God, where's this movie been my whole life? Like a movie that like breaks these rules. And it was like the first time I probably really saw something where it breaks the fourth wall in a way that like truly interacts with the audience. And this shit truly blew my fucking mind as a kid. Like I couldn't believe it. I like grew up loving movies, and this was like something kind of like magical recipe of breaking the fourth wall that I've always loved. Even like looking back at like Looney Tunes or random things like that. So when it breaks the fourth wall and you're talking about film, something I already love, and then you're breaking the fourth wall as well, and then it's all about a film debate, what we do on this fucking podcast, like it just lined up so perfectly for me when I first watched this movie. And I love this scene. I mean, like, what an iconic scene from this movie. I love that they bring him in, and it's like, because I've literally felt that way. It's like, imagine if you could talk to someone and they just don't know what they're talking about. And in this case, this guy is actually a historic history professor. He's like, should be knowledgeable about film in this case, but he's not. And you just want to prove him wrong. And it's like, I've been in that situation so many times where I'm like, if I could just like, this situation even happened recently to me from work. I can think about talking to someone about movies and they just said something as like a fact. And it's the head of my HR. And I'm like, I don't want to argue with this person and just tell her in front of everyone else that she's very wrong about the movie fact she just said out loud. But I'm not going to be an Alvy. I'm not going to do what he did and be an asshole and like bring it out and just argue with her. So I find the scene so relatable. I find, honestly, Alvy's a piece of shit, but I've related to him a lot as a kid. And I think that's kind of like the growth you take on this movie, is that you watch this. And especially as a man, the first time you watch it, you're like, damn. Like, I love Alvy. Alvy's the best. Like, I'm totally Alvy. Like, fuck Annie Hall. She did not understand him. Like, you just got to be cool and as smart as him, and then you would be the perfect match, you know? And then you get older and you realize, like, no, the punchline is always him. That's the whole point of this movie, is that it is a joke on him. He's talking to us as if we're therapists, being like, why can't I figure out this shit in my life? It's great. Honestly, I feel like our conversation is going to go back and forth to you hating everything and me being like, I love that aspect of this movie. I do not understand. It's great. Like, it's, yeah, that's where I'll leave off the whole.
Like, does he actually grow by the end of the movie? Do you think he like figures it out?
I think he finds, it's like the last scene is really important for him and his character. It's like, he's still Alvy. He's still making a play, not really learning from this situation. But it's like almost like the final goodbye that he has with Annie Hall that really like seals the deal. And I think it comes from her exact dialogue where she's like calling him Manhattan, basically. Like, he is this lonely little island that like has all this like energy and a lot of things to do, but just doesn't like mesh well with other people. And I think it's almost like you're just determining and learning about who you are. I mean, this whole film is about dating and growing and like finding out who you are by dating other people. And I think it perfectly captures that by the end of the movie. Like, the different people you date along the way kind of tell you about who you are. And maybe you gain things from dating other people, and you learn things about other people and learn things about yourself when you date other people on that. I think that kind of just summarizes the whole film from both of their point of views, really.
Yeah, it definitely does. Like, I'm not trying to be like, just like, I really don't want to hate on the movie because of like the Woody Allen factor, but again, it's just like, it's just the characters like that we have to see this like lens through. It just becomes a little bit exhausting, and so it's like, okay, sure, like that's the point of the movie, but like that, like if this movie didn't win Best Picture, I think I might have like a little bit of a softer take maybe on it. I think I'd be like, it's kind of like a whatever movie, but because the way it's talked about, I just don't see it like the same way. I don't think I think there are funnier movies. I think there's like smarter ways of doing stuff. Maybe it's just like, it's just too much. Like, I just see this person and this like, who has these perspectives on life, and again, like hating the mainstream, and maybe it's also being a New York Jew who like loves film, but it's like, I hate your view take on it almost. Like, I hate the hating it, because it just feels like, maybe I feel like I'm any fan of it. I'm just exhausted by like the negativity in a way. Like, I don't like, yeah, I want to read cat books. I don't want to read books about death. Like, she, like, the way her costumes, like, she combines herself with like whatever man she's with. So she just like starts to develop this like negativity on Alvy, and it's just like, it makes her kind of like a worse person. And I think it's the fact of like, I'm turning 30 soon, and he's 40 in the movie, so like that age difference, like perspective, like feels like very close, and it feels like he's not mature enough to like understand like many aspects about relationships and love, and so, and because it doesn't feel so unresolved, because his resolution to it is like, well, I need relationships. Like, I'm always going to need it. Like, I'm always going to need the eggs that he's talking about in the story. But I just like don't you want to know more? Like, don't you want to fix that almost? Like, don't you want to not have these like relationships that like don't fulfill you? Because he's not feeling fulfilled unless he's having sex with the person constantly. I mean, in the therapy scene where it's a split screen, but it's not really a split screen. It's happening at the same time. And he's just like, well, I only have sex like 3 times a week. And she's like, we constantly have sex. It's 3 times a week, which is like, that's funny. But if that like as itself is funny, but then when there's like, again, like the 50 other bits before it, I'm just like, okay, yeah, sure. Just keep going. And like for a movie that's 93 minutes, it feels, not saying like it drags, but it feels like there's so much packed into it that then like it goes beyond 93 minutes, which I don't know. Do you feel like it not that it drags, but like it feels longer than 93 minutes, which also I think is a detriment to it because you kind of want to see this resolution. I think that there's a lot of stuff in the ending of the film, like him like recreating the play is like a little absurd. You kind of wish he had gone to that coda without that. Like if he had like been like, okay, I proposed, she didn't do it, and he's just sad trying to figure it out, and then it's like, well, then we met like a year later and had this like beautiful coda at the end with the montage. I think might have helped it a little bit. I don't know, just spitballing here. But yeah, there's just something about him that I just don't fundamentally agree with.
Yeah, that's fair. I wanted to ask you specifically, as a Jewish man yourself, and you mentioned him and his insane character as Alvy kind of explores New York and the world. I was kind of curious. Some people referred to this as like a Jewish film. And I'm just curious whether you think that's the case, maybe your thoughts on like what that is. Like, does a Jewish film have to be about Jewish culture? Can it just like be about a character who's Jewish who then kind of mentions things about his culture throughout the way? Or does it have to be specifically about like a Jewish event or some sort of like cultural family holiday or, whatever you may think? Let me know.
I think it's the Jewish experience is like the thing that makes it like a Jewish movie. And a lot of that, unfortunately, has to do with like the Holocaust or, being kicked out of like different areas of the world. Whereas like this is like a very specific like persona, but there's no like, I think any New Yorker could have these perspectives in a way without having to be Jewish. Because I think there's a lot of Jewish influence in a lot of New York culture. But it's like kind of a mix of like Italian and like Jewish culture makes like New York like its own like unique thing. But going beyond that, I don't see it as like being like the quintessential like Jewish experience to make it like stand on its own. I don't think we've really seen a Best Picture winner that like encapsulates that. I mean, like we have obviously like Ben-Hur, being this like Jewish hero in like the biblical times. We have A Gentleman's Agreement with Gregory Peck pretending to be Jewish to prove a certain social point, which is like that had issues in it of itself. And like we jump like way ahead to like Schindler's List, which is like the Jewish experience during the Holocaust, but even that has like problems with like perspective, which I don't necessarily agree with, but what people will bring up about that movie. So it's like it's really hard to say like this is like the quintessential Jewish movie because I don't know what makes it essentially Jewish outside of just Woody Allen being Jewish himself and like the mention of it. There's no like other thing that like I think makes it definitively Jewish.
Yeah, it's not like the whole movie is about some sort of like historical Jewish experience or moment in time. But it's weird because obviously I can't make this distinction. I'm not Jewish. I can't define something or not. But it's interesting. It's like if you take a character who's Catholic and there's a lot of Catholic jokes throughout the movie. There's a lot of references to that he's Catholic. Maybe his girlfriend at the time's parents don't like that he's Catholic. I mean, all of those things happen in this movie, all about Jewish culture. Like even to the point where they make multiple jokes about it. They're at the dinner scene where he betrays like an Hasidic Jew. Like there's a lot about him being Jewish in New York and how that's a thing. And there's a lot to this that you can then maybe like see how it's like progressed in culture and things like Seinfeld, where you always think of that being like an iconic piece of like Jewish entertainment and it being about New York City. I don't know. Just generally curious what you thought about that, but it's interesting because it is asking that question, like, does it have to be specifically everything about that culture, or can this just be like, this is a very large and important, like, or was maybe you would say, Jewish film character because he was proudly Jewish. He was like even iffy about, you know, his girlfriend because her parents were, you know, anti. So I don't know. It's a weird kind of blend where it's really important aspect of his character. I mean, it gets brought up multiple times. There's multiple jokes about it, even like Jewish jokes that he references directly coming from Jewish culture. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And I know like one of the like working titles for the movie was like it had to be Jew was like one of the working titles, which is like funny. But again, like I just don't see it as like fundamentally Jewish. And I also wonder if like that like stereotype that of him at the dinner, he's dressed like a Hasidic man, is like easy for people to portray and digest because of perspectives on Jews in the world, or maybe just because the way that Jews are so integrated in entertainment and that culture that it's like, yeah, this is hilarious. This is like fine to like make fun of in a way. And like, I don't know. I think it's like, it's fine. But it just shows kind of like the, you know, how the rest of this country like doesn't understand Judaism, which is why it's like to say like this is like the quintessential Jewish experience to me is like I don't know if that fully is like encapsulates it. And I think that's why like sometimes when you get movies about the Holocaust and you like learn from that, A Fiddler on the Roof even, like that feels more like this is like Judaism in many ways because of the community aspect where he's very much a loner in so much of this movie. He is very alone and he's like trying to like find himself by like trying to be something more than what he, you know, than he is. Like he's just this like neurotic guy and he tries to be this like macho like man who dictates the women that he has relationships with and like tries to make them and model them into like how he sees and views the world, and like that's like also the detriment to like those relationships that he has. He like can't get out of his own way, which I guess is Jewish in and of itself.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people, especially reading reviews and retrospective people talking about it as kind of like defying a cliche of like the quotes neurotic Jew, like New York Jew, and that's not my words. Back me up here, Ben. Not my words.
Yeah, I know. No,
Quotes,
I know.
Quotes from other people. So I'm not saying that that's the case. It's just I just wanted to throw it out to you with your perspective, your background. Just curious on your thoughts on that. And it's true. It's like it's almost like a Christmas movie. Like a Christmas movie, is that defined by it taking place on Christmas, or can it be just be about Christmas? Can it be just be about the gifts, or can it be just about Santa Claus? You know, it's like that ever-ending question of like, does it really have to all be about that to be labeled as that? Do we even need that label?
But like with Christmas movies, it's a lot like family, feel goodness about it. Whereas like to call this quintessentially Jewish, it's like to you know make it like about a neurotic person who's like can't find themselves, that like has like all these issues with this and that, like oy vey this, oy vey that. It's like that's not me all the time. But like, you know, it doesn't feel like with like a Christmas movies like that are out there, which are much more about the family and feels like more realistic. This feels more like a caricature that like Woody Allen is well within his right to portray as a Jewish person, but it doesn't feel like that is like what you should now take away as like every Jew is like this. So, you know,
right. We mentioned a lot.
I also, no, I know, but I want to know more about like what else stands out to you about this movie. Because I am, as the person who's like, isn't the lover of this movie, like I want to know like what more about it that you are so, you know, engrossed by.
So I wanted to mention like kind of the opening and ending. We talked a little bit of kind of both in general. But I wanted to like know your opinions on just like the opening monologue. That movie starts, it's dead quiet, there's credits, it's just Woody Allen's face. Like it's just Woody Allen's face with like a grayish background or orange background, and then he's just immediately talking to you. I think it's like an extremely jarring way to open up a movie, but it's intentional. I think it's immediately grabs your attention. You're like, what is this? Is this another trailer? Is this like a Hitchcock trailer like he would do back in the day? I think it like kind of pulls you in immediately. So yeah, answer that and I can kind of expand more.
Yeah, I think it comes to that question of like, do you get bothered by the fourth wall breaking? And maybe again, because we grew up with like Bugs Bunny constantly breaking the fourth wall for us in, you know, many ways growing up. It's just like, it doesn't bother me as much as like other people do. It's like, no, you can't break the fourth wall. It's like, it's actually kind of a fun device if used well. and appropriately, and I think it is like used well because he's like, this is in my head, like that, like we immediately get that perspective of him, and that this movie is like his perspective. So I have like no issues with like breaking the fourth wall. So now I want to know, like, do you have issues with that, and like more about like what you think of the opening?
Yeah, no, I absolutely love breaking the fourth wall. I mean, I wrote a script last year that I sent you and you read, and it's all about a character breaking the fourth wall. The whole film is honestly, it's heavily inspired by this movie because I love this movie. I really love The Apartment, which has like a similar feel in terms of being about this like strong point of view, and obviously you have voiceover instead of like breaking the fourth wall. But I think it's still that they're pretty relatable movies, which I gave The Apartment 100. So I just think about that when it comes to my review. But I think breaking the fourth wall is like so fun. I mean, like I said, Alfie, you got to watch it. It's similar in the way that it's so about sex, but it's a lot darker and more serious. I'm gonna warn you now than Annie Hall is. But breaking the fourth wall is just like, it makes you giggle. You're like, you're not supposed to do this. Like, you're breaking the law. Like, ooh, bad. Tisk, 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 you know? And that's kind of what screamed. Filmmaker. Truly, though. And I, like, say what you want about Woody Allen. I know you will. This dude was a fucking rebel. This guy was making films that were so unique to him. He is one of the biggest standout auteurs in filmmaking ever. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. His filmmaking and style is so recognizable. You can't not call him an auteur. Most people know who he is now, probably for the horrible accusations that are held against him. But a lot of people can immediately kind of recognize, whether it's dialogue or kind of like the look or even the actors that he likes to reuse a lot, that he's truly an auteur. And he's taken that style and matured, I think, when it gets to this movie. I've seen, I don't know, maybe like 6 of his films, which is, maybe like closer to 8, which is not that many because, as you may know, he's released movies basically every year since, like, I don't know, this year maybe, like 1974, 1975. Like, he just has released a film, sometimes even multiple films in one year. He's extremely prolific as a filmmaker, which is kind of impressive. I mean, I've read about him wanting to just make films that way, as if like he's obsessed with work and that he just wants to crank film after film after film. And it's not even about, it's almost like he needs to just like get off his chest in a weird way. And you can kind of see that with Annie Hall because it's so personal, and it does feel like it's reflective of his own life in some way. Who he is a New Yorker, he's loved New York his whole life, I believe, and that's kind of been a big part of him. And maybe that's because of this and Manhattan and some of the other films he's made, and that kind of ties him with New York now forever, really. But I mean, there's so many reasons why I love this movie, and it's really, I don't even think you can say breaking the fourth wall. It's perspective, and I think breaking the fourth wall, that's a part of that perspective. The animation outbreaks, the thinking of people's heads, the therapy session, all of this film screamed like a unique point of view, which I think makes it fit into that kind of like auteur category. But it's also Alvy's point of view. It's like extremely unique to him. There's like some POV shots, like Steadicam shots that they use throughout the movie that are really interesting. And I just found it to be so refreshing. Like, even as a kid growing up, and you know, I always talk about 2008 as being like the best year of my life when it comes to movies, because you have The Dark Knight and you have Iron Man both coming out in 2008. And as like a lover of superheroes, both those movies coming out in the same year, they're both like fantastic. It like kind of look back at it and being like, oh my God, that's like truly when I like fell in love with movies, is because of that year. And I watched this probably like not too far from around that age. I was 13 at that point. I was probably like maybe 15 or 16 when I watched this movie. And it was like the first time that I was like blown away in the way that you step back and you're like, who let this person do this? Like, how did this happen? Like, how did this person get away with this almost? And I never felt that way about a movie ever almost at that point in time. And that's probably because I didn't watch enough movies. I was still younger. I was trying to watch as much as I can. But I don't feel that way about many movies. And I still watch this movie and I still just think about like how witty the dialogue is. It's so snappy. It's so smart. There's a lot of references I still don't even understand because they're so of the time. So I can't really like fully even grasp some of it because I don't know as much information about the 70s as I probably should. But man, I could just go on and on. That's why I'm just gonna start rambling. So I gotta pass it back to you. One, I just want to hear. I know you don't like Alvy's as a character, but can you appreciate some of the interesting perspectives that they do, like the animation, the POV, the therapy session, split screen, the voiceover, like the talking directly to camera, like anything that you like about that perspective?
To me, and this is the art versus artist thing, where it's like the technical aspects of the movie is well done, and it's like it is really cool. I like that. Those are the aspects like I can't deny. But when it comes to like again like Alvy's perspective, it's just a type of person that I don't enjoy. Like I just truly don't, especially when it does come to like talking about movies, talking about mainstream aspects. It just that's where I don't match up on. So like I think that like doing this Snow White animation is like unique. The fourth wall breaking is unique. The long shots, it like like you said, like he is an auteur, and like I can't deny that because he's with so many others. It's just the like I don't have to like agree though with like everything that is like portrayed. Yeah, like Wes Anderson is like an auteur director that I love, that like so many people like don't like understand in some ways, because that is like such a specific style, especially the way the characters are portrayed and created within like those worlds. Like some people like can't like get on with, and I just find that every time like I have seen like a Woody Allen movie, it's like it's interesting, but it's never like this feels like exactly how I feel in some ways. And again, it's just that like bashing against like the popular stuff that like he loves to do, that I just don't, I've never like agreed with like those kinds of perspectives. But I am curious to know what you do think about Diane Keaton within this movie, because we talked so much about Woody Allen, Alvy Singer. This movie is called Annie Hall, so you would think that she has this like very big like reason to like love this movie. And sometimes I like think about that a lot of people that talk about is like her costume is like so iconic, but I don't really hear like too much else about the character that like truly stands out, because I feel like sometimes she is meant to be such a comedic aspect to the movie, like something that like Alvy is like, oh, this is like ridiculous how like ditzy she is, and like how like whimsical she is, like he just doesn't get her. But like I think like I get her a little bit. I think I get like her like wants and like needs within the film. So I'm curious in like what you think about just her in the movie.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, even just the way you just described it, like I get her is, it's like that's kind of the point. This movie is about like dating, and it's about like finding your right match. And there's like people along the way while you're dating that you're like, wow, like we are pretty different in opposing ways that somehow like blend and mesh in other ways. And then you create like this really strong connection. And then maybe it takes time, maybe it's pretty soon, you realize like, oh, like we're like too different. Like maybe there's too different of aspects of who we are that we need to kind of like come and kind of break up, because we're just like, we need something else from a partner basically. So in that way, you're looking at Annie and you're like, yeah, she is softer, more sentimental, and she's just sweeter in general, and she's more kind. And that almost works in that she finds his bluntness, his wit, his like dry sense of humor. She finds that like hysterical at first because it's so unlike her. It's like new and refreshing to her, I imagine. But it doesn't work. Like that is not the right recipe for their relationship, and it just doesn't line up. And that is kind of then highlighted with the men she dates, the women he dates, and the way they kind of portray that in such like a snappy, quick fashion, where you get to learn so much about like who they are and who their relationships were, and how each of those previous partners are like so different, which I love about the movie, is that all those different characters that get thrown in randomly and they're completely gone. But Diane Keaton is just so goddamn good in this movie. She is so sweet. You just want to like reach in and pinch her cute little white cheeks. She's so freaking cute. I'm like, we talked about, the fashion. Ralph Lauren supposedly designed her awesome, cool blazer suit that she wears after they play tennis. And that's iconic and everything. But putting the fashion aside, like you said, her character constantly challenges Alfie. And sometimes she doesn't win, but that's kind of like her progression as a character. The movie is called Annie Hall at the end of the day. And it's funny that you talk about like Alvy, and it's like, yeah, Alvy definitely learns a little bit, but like as a character and what you would say maybe is our main character, it's not like the huge drastic change. It's more so that like Annie, I think, learns and progresses more about like her not finding the right relationship and maybe finding people that are maybe more sensitive than like she is, more open with their emotions and less just thinking about everything being negative all the time. And I think that's why the humor works in a lot of the films, because they're so different and they're just constantly contrasting and conflicting with each other in a way that's sweet and not like your typical like aggressive romantic comedy where like the two hate each other. This is that like interesting spark where they like know and like each other almost immediately. And I mean, that first scene when they are like leaving the tennis club, I could just rewatch that over and over. Like her performance, she plays like nervousness and like, I like this guy, I like this boy, but like I don't want to show it, but also I'm being so awkward, it's so obvious that I do. Like she plays that so well in that scene. Every time I watch it, I'm like, this feels so real. Like this just feels like two characters that I'm watching like on reality TV right now. It's great. It's just that they're dressed in these sweet 70s fashion. It's awesome. This movie is so much of like a product of its time too. Like you talked about the cinematography, and it's just like captures this like hipstery at the time. That word like probably didn't even exist, but like the kind of like upper scale, but also kind of like a counterculture hipsters, but they're also kind of like wealthy. You know, it like highlights that aspect. And when you look at like Midnight Cowboy, it's like the complete opposite. It's the gritty, ugly, down and dirty people of New York. And this is like the upscale, elegant, like a beautiful apartment, and then she opens up the balcony and it's this beautiful view of Manhattan. And it's like, how much would that apartment cost nowadays in Manhattan? Like, you know, $10,000 a month. You know what I mean? I
think at one point they said like one of their apartments was like $400, which I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Sounds like,
it's like $400 a day now. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's ridiculous nowadays. I mean. Yeah, the performance is really good. I like the nervousness is like fun and quirky. I do love the fashion. Would you date Annie Hall? Is she like the girl that you would want? Just because I feel like she does also embody the person that she's with, which I don't know if I like love that. Like she doesn't seem to have her own uniqueness until she's like with somebody, which is like, I don't know if that's Alvy's perspective on her, if that's like intentional in some ways, or if that's just like who she is and that's what like we're supposed to analyze about her. To me, it's very interesting to like think about that way of just like who is the true like Annie, because is it the person that goes through therapy that like kind of hates him at the end? Because we see this spark in the tennis club, but at the beginning of the movie, they're at each other's throats. You know, like Alvy's commenting that she's like moody because she's on her period, which is like problematic in and of itself. And she like just kind of goes along with like some of his like antics and shit, but she also like doesn't know how to get out of it in some ways too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think I would date her. The answer to your first question is absolutely. Diane Keaton is so adorable and just, gosh darn, smitten every time I watch this movie. She's a perfect amount of like cute, but also sexy and intelligent and emotional, and like, yeah, she seems very well rounded. She does like latch on to the people and their hobbies, their kind of like being, their persona. But I think that's really relatable. I think that happens to a lot of people when they date. They like kind of become that person, or that person maybe becomes their muse. And I think that's pretty common. It could be as well, like you said, partially his point of view and just the way he sees it, where he's like, oh, and a lot of people like will almost try to like do that to line up their personality and their being because they like that person so much and they like want to please that person. So they think mentally like, oh, that is what I want to be, so that person will like me even more, even though that person just likes you because you are different in the first place. And now that you've changed, that person probably doesn't like you as much anymore because you're more like them now. So you like lose that aspect of it, which is really interesting. And it's not like the film goes deep in it, but that's there. That's like kind of a huge portion about this movie and about what Annie learns basically by dating these different people, is that maybe she can pick up some things here and there from these people, but at the end of the day, she'll probably learn, probably with that last guy she's with, that she's kind of found the right recipe of a human being that she likes and the kind of man that she wants. So there's like a lot of nuance to this movie, and I'm glad you brought up the non-linear storytelling, and that could probably add to the length of the film, the way it feels a little bit longer. I mean, it is really short and it's really snappy and quick, especially with like how fast the dialogue is being spoken as well at times. But I love the movie because it goes by in a flash for me. But I do think that it does feel longer than it is when you say it out loud, like a little over 90 minutes. So I wanted to ask you, Ben, like, how do you feel about that like non-linear style of editing? It's almost like you're remembering Annie Hall and you're thinking about this relationship as you're just like sitting in a New York cafe diner, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like how it gets played around, because you're just like, he becomes such an unreliable narrator too because of it, because you're just like, where is this that he's thinking about? Like, what is he that he's pulling from that's making him like feel this way, that's seeing this perspective? Because it is very much feels like, well, is this what happened? Is this why I went wrong? Is this why I feel this way? So I like when it does get nonlinear. I mean, like, everyone loves Pulp Fiction. It's like all out of order, but we all like piecing it together and trying to figure out like, when did this happen? Did this happen before? Like, was John Travolta here, but then there? It's really interesting and like fun to play around with. So I think it's like a fun aspect to it. And again, it's one of those technical aspects that like I appreciate, and I think it is played around with well. With the story. I think that's what makes it like fun for like people to watch, because they're trying to figure out like when did this happen? Like what did this make it go wrong? Did that make it go wrong within their relationship?
Yeah, which I think is really relatable, right? So
yeah,
I think that's probably why the movie was so popular. I think because New York is this like fashion icon. It's this place where like people want to be. It's like if you're in America, you look at like Los Angeles and New York as like the two kind of like peaks on either coast, and they're important. And when you see a film that kind of like identifies that location, it's got like a star like Diane Keaton. She's like the titular star. Her name is her character. Then you got this new guy who's like, oh, like he's made some kind of like smaller indie comedy films, but he takes a very like mature step moving up to this film, and I think takes it to his career, obviously takes it to the next level. He changes into becoming a more like blend of comedic as well as a lot more dramatic of a filmmaker. But you know what's something I thought of the first scene, since we're bringing up like breaking the fourth wall? Why do you think he chose to make it like just a blank wall? Like, this movie is always textured. Like, he's always in a location where there's, like, people moving in the background, or he's in the street, or there's always something happening. Why do you think he just chose to open the movie with him, like, dead breaking the fourth wall with a blank basic background of just, like, orange-brown? Why do you think he did that?
I think it's just a way to make him, like, stand out and make you, like, focus solely on him.
Yeah.
You know, because there's no, like, distraction. It's, it's a bright background, so he's, like, pretty well lit. Pops right out like onto the screen. I think like that's really more the intention that I got out of it, was to make you so focused on what he has to say. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, it's so in your face. I like thought about it for probably the first time I rewatched it like a month or so ago, and it was probably like the fourth or fifth time that I've seen this movie now at this point. And I never really thought about it. I just was thinking like, oh, that's just like a scene later on in the movie that like they just were at, I guess. And that's like technically when he's telling the story, that's when the movie starts. But that could have been like a scene that happens later on in the movie, if that makes sense, because the film is told, non-linearly. So I like thought about that, and I was like, let me go back, and I was like scrolling, and I was like, am I about to uncover something very cool about this movie that I didn't know? And I haven't even like looked it up or done research, but no, it is just probably shot some random set. They chose that color. There's no other scene with that background that I've noticed or anything. So I don't think so. I even like was comparing walls in some scenes. Like there's the wall in the movie theater that they're standing next to, and I'm like, it's kind of brown. It's kind of darker brown though. Like, that's how far I was looking through this bad boy trying to figure this out. But
what does this wall mean?
Yeah, I'm just like, what? Who's this wall? Where did this wall come from?
You're nuts. Staring at walls. So I think kind of like my final question is just because we talk about like best pictures, changing everything. Like, what's the one thing from this movie that you think fundamentally changed film moving forward?
Interesting. I thought you would have saved this for the end.
No.
Let me think, because I have some more things to say. I was not expecting.
Well, because I asked that because like the obvious like other movie to like that could have won Best Picture is Star Wars, and like I think it's obvious like what it did, to change movies going forward, and that was kind of like my thing with like looking at this and how others talk about this movie is they're like, no, this changed how comedy worked, this changed how this got made, this changed how perspective and real is talking. I'm like, I felt like I saw a lot of this in The Apartment. It happened one night. I felt like I've seen this before, like where, maybe the more realistic aspects of it does like jump off because it's a little more modern versus some of those other movies. But it's like, I still feel like I got like a lot of wit and banter from It Happened One Night, which is 40 years before this movie came out, like, so that's why I ask.
So I was going to save this because it applies to Star Wars and other things. So I'm not going to go too deep. But I've seen people talk about like Star Wars is for the dreamers, while Annie Hall is more like the tongue-in-cheek realists or the negative Nellies, the negative thinkers that like always think of like the world sucks, it's going to end, it's the worst, whatever, who cares. So that's just like an interesting perspective that I could kind of agree with in a way. I mean, I love both of these movies, and I'll talk more about Star Wars later. But in terms of Annie Hall, since you asked that question, I think it does capture the spirit of this era. But I think it's also very unique in that it tells this super unique perspective. There's like not been many of these films, Best Picture winners in particular, that are telling this very like authentic perspective. You're seeing things from people's point of view. Like you're in his head. You're literally talking to him at times. You're like seeing him translate animation. Like it does all these weird things about his character and who he is. And it represents the perspective. And Woody Hall as an auteur obviously captures that brilliantly. But it's like the level of wit in the dialogue, how snappy everything is. The script is just so well written. It just constantly has all these like interesting references, all these like funny jokes, like don't knock masturbation, it's sex with someone I love. Like there's hysterical lines in this movie. I don't care what you say, Ben. That line is so funny. But I wanted to read a quote from Roger Ebert, just because I want to prove my point that there's people out there that love this movie. It's not just me.
I know people of this. There are not many people
not
like
just
me who have this perspective. Like people love this movie, and that's where I'm just like, but why?
Roger Ebert said in 2002, Annie Hall contains more intellectual wit and cultural references than any other movie ever to win the Oscar for Best Picture. That is a direct quote from the man who re-reviewed the movie in 2002. And I honestly agree with that. I saw that quote and I read through all of it, and I truly think this represents like this extremely witty writing that we eventually get in more films down the line. And we do have some of that when you look back at, like Bringing Up Baby and, I'm blanking on the other one. But there's a lot of like witty, fast talking dialogue when you look back at like 30s, 40s, and 50s filmmaking. It's not just like the fast talking and the wit. It's taking that and then it's like modernizing it for the 70s. I think there's a lot of people that relate to this movie because they see themselves in it. They see themselves in Annie Hall. They see themselves in Alvy. They're like almost like these unique modern day tropes manipulated to like match the current day so well. And then if you want to bring up Star Wars, I think that is like technically so bright, shiny, and new technically, but everything else is like the past. It's like using archetype of like old characters, you know, like the ancient wizard, the hero's journey, all these things that we've seen before throughout cinema and throughout storytelling, just redone in this like crazy new technical way that's like magnificent, mind-blowing, like truly mind-blowing. So I think it really like comes down to that. Like Annie Hall is not this like mind-blowing looking movie. There's not these like crazy action shots and explosions and cool different special effects and like new ways of shooting things, but I think it's extremely unique in the way it's written non-linearly. I think it's extremely unique in the way it shows his character, that it's not your stereotypical love story, but it's also really sweet and romantic at the same time. I think it does a lot. And I think it has impacted culture a lot. Like, I don't think up until this point, cutaway humor was that really big of a thing. You know, making a joke or a reference that may not even make sense, and then all of a sudden cutting to another scene from another point of time, with another girlfriend or another person. That's like super rare, especially for filmmaking at this point in time. And I think nowadays when we look back at this movie, it's like cutaway humor. What do you mean? Like, I've been watching that on Family Guy for the last 30 years. Like, cutaway humor is so popular in like animation and all these like TV shows that we've kind of gotten used to. Especially as like we've like progressed with the sitcom era and now out of it. So it's, I think, is new and fresh in a lot of ways. It's just when you visually look at it, you may not feel that way like you do with Star Wars, to answer that question.
Yeah, but to me, it's like the intellectual stuff, like the comedy of it. Like we got so intimate with like Capra when we first started this podcast, and like we had two of his movies win Best Picture between It Happened One Night and You Can't Take It With You, which had to have like influenced Woody Allen in a big way. I think like it would be hard for him to be like, no, like Frank Capra like didn't influence me. So like that's where I'm just like, but we have like seen this before. Did he take it to another level? Yeah, like that's what we want from filmmakers. But to act like it hasn't been there before, to me, is like denying some great comedy that came before it. So like that's just like when I think of like Ebert's quote, where it's like up like 2002, so still had like a lot of other movies. Like there's a lot of intellectual stuff. Is it as like witty as Annie Hall? Maybe not, but that doesn't mean like we haven't seen a Best Picture winner like before. Like even with The Apartment, I think has like the same intellectual aspects about men and women relationships, and I think it has these comedic aspects that are endearing, honest, realistic, while still having this mask of like film put over it, so I really don't want to poo-poo it, but it's just like I do think like when it comes to like the aspects of that people like say like, well, this is new and like this is different, this did that, I'm like, but I think we have had these before. So I don't know if like people, if I'm not seeing it the same way as that, because I think that screwball comedies is like the archetype framework that like Woody Allen uses for most of his movies, which is like those were, we were calling the screwball comedies like the rom-coms, like that's eventually what they became. So I just wonder if like that is something to also consider too, where it's like, again, like with it, like how much was like really changed. Yes, it got witty, it was more modern, but it doesn't feel like so new compared to the Star Wars. And maybe we can save that conversation again for like the end of this pod when we get to talk about Best Picture and the Oscars from that year, where it's like, yes, it's like archetypal for a lot of what Star Wars did, but because of like the visuals and like the groundbreakingness of it was so impactful, like we're still feeling the reverberations today. It's like, are we still feeling the same reverberations in Annie Hall in like comedy? Do you see that like still today? Or
I just explained it. Yeah, like Family Guy is like a huge essential comedy show that's built around cutaway humor, and I think this movie kind of like defined cutaway humor for the American audience and really for the modern audience. Like it was done in animation obviously beforehand, but I think it truly defined like cutaway humor in general. And I do think it's different though. You have like an unreliable narrator. It's definitely breaks the fourth wall, but it's using someone who breaks the fourth wall and like in a way that's never been done before. Like talking about film while also breaking the fourth wall, that certainly hasn't ever been done before. Not that I've seen. I don't know. Definitely, I don't think has ever been done before. So it's like story and writing, I think, which is like I said, the antithesis of Star Wars. It's the worst part of Star Wars is the story and the writing. And I'm not saying Star Wars is bad. I freaking love Star Wars, but it's true. I think most people would agree. Like the story, like dialogue and like the basic simple story is probably the worst part about Star Wars, the original. So it's hard. You could even edit this back into the end of the podcast because now this is truly becoming a Star Wars debate.
I know. It's getting to
That's why I didn't want to open this can of worms.
I know, but I think it's like important because of like how Annie Hall gets talked about. Again, like to me, like reading everything, it was talking about how changed everything. Like that was like felt like the theme that I got so much from like people's reviews at the time was like this is a game changer, and I just don't see it as like the game. I think I can understand some of it, but I can't understand how like some of the other movies that came before it had already been happening. And he also had made movies before this that like were comedies, like like Marx Brothers like comedy like esque, and like. So it just feels like he's done this. It's just that he hadn't been a romantic with his storytelling, like that we were getting this more mature look on his movies and his perspective. But yet still, I find Alvy isn't as mature as maybe you expect a 40-year-old person to be.
Yeah. I think I could totally see why people hate him so much. To the point where they're like, I can't do this movie. Like, I do not like this because he bothers me so much, whether it's him personally or him in real life, connecting the two, or even just the annoyance of his character, I
think I've, like, again, been trying to, like, separate it. But as I said, at, like, kind of the top of, like, this conversation of art versus artist, it's like, because of the stuff that he's, like, the allegations against him, matches like what his subject matter is sometimes, like what he talks about. It's hard to like not see that, which like, I understand, but you're right, like you do have to like separate it and like look at it critically in a different way. But I'm still coming to the same conclusion that like Alvy is just such a fucking asshole at the end of the day for me, and that's why like what I said earlier was just like I used to think Annie was the problem because I as a guy, you don't understand women. You're just like, no, the woman understood herself pretty well. It was the guy who is not well adjusted at all.
Yeah I think a lot of that where people are saying it like changed their perspective, changed like filmmaking and changed the industry, is that it's just so personal. Like it feels like opening someone's journal and like that's the film, and that just hasn't really been a thing. Like you could maybe even point to like Rocky being like, oh, okay, that like really gets you into his kind of like head state, but this obviously portrays him literally because he's talking to you, and you see him kind of navigate his life, and the way they kind of show that in so many different ways with animation, with like the split screen, with the seeing the old relationships, the non-linear, like all these different like storytelling aspects. And then when you take the script and just the dialogue, I think is something like that we like could have. I'm surprised you didn't have any quotes because there's so many quotes from this movie, and you're the quote guy on Worthy, so I'm kind of like a little bit annoyed with you right now because there's like I don't care if you think this movie's not that funny. There's definitely 20 quotes in this movie that you definitely laugh at, you motherfucker, that you could have pulled for this podcast. But that's like, I think it's very realistic and there's a lot of realism to the dialogue that we've definitely not seen in a lot of these movies. Like there's amazing movies, but they may not have that sense of like realism and realistic like dialogue that is if you passed Annie Hall or Alvy on the street having a conversation, like it feels very naturalistic. They just happen to be like witty New Yorkers, so they talk in the sophisticated, well-written way. And I also think at this point now it doesn't feel that real because we've seen so much of this kind of filmmaking, so it kind of like dampers it in a way.
I did write down like a few lines. I think that the love is too weak a word for what I feel. I love you. I love you. I love. I think like that's like witty and like cute, and something that like I heard someone point out. It's just like he never says like I love you to her, which is like very interesting. How he's like craves this like love from like others, but like he can't even admit it himself. Which is just like kind of again like my problem with Alvy. I'm just like, you are a 40-year-old man, fucking grow up already. Just like get over yourself. And I just don't think he gets over it himself. And that's why I asked that question of like, did he learn anything? Did he really change, or is he just like, well, this is who I am, and I'm not gonna do anything really about it. Just gonna have to deal with it. And I don't know if like that's necessarily the healthiest thing to do.
No, definitely not. I think he learns a little bit. I think he learns that, like, obviously, as he explains at the end, it's very obvious because he tells us, like, he needs it. He needs relationships, whether he's in them for a long time or he finds the right person. He just needs to be in them. I mean, we were already finding this character divorced twice. Like, This dude clearly is having relationship problems. He's already not probably been a very good husband. Like, he's not meant to be a very good character. And I know you like films where there are people that are not good characters too.
Oh yeah, I love me an anti-hero.
Exactly, and he's not an anti-hero. He's kind of just like a little fucking. He fits comedians so well, and we haven't talked that much about how he is like a comedian in this movie. We don't see much of his stand-up. There's a political kind of like rally stand-up that he does with a funny bit, but we don't see much of it. But he does fit that archetype of comedian. Like, I see that now. They're full of themselves. They love talking and chatting about everything. They think they know like everything because their job is to just like think about things and stories and other places and things they went and saw. So he's like full of himself and won't stop talking about everything he wants to talk about or himself. And he loves talking about art. It's like, I watch a lot of comedians podcasts and a lot of stand-up, and this guy fits the mold of a comedian. Like, I think he painted this character really well, and he does stand out. So it just sucks that he is a little weirdo.
A little, I think, is putting it mildly.
Well, I said little for a reason, but
because he's little.
Well, yeah, that too.
Oh God,
the shortest best director, maybe. I don't know.
That's funny because I do have a little like stat for a different person.
Yes. No spoilers. No spoilers.
Well, is there any final thoughts you have on Annie Hall? I just want to like, I can appreciate what others appreciate about it, but it's just the fundamental aspect of, it's not Woody Allen's like personal stuff that gets in the way of this. It's just, I don't think that me and Alvy would necessarily see eye to eye on things. And if Alvy was like on this podcast, I think I would have, I don't know what he would have said that would have been like different than like our takes, but it would have been something that would be like so like hater-ish that would be like, why are you hating on this? What is the point of hating on something that like everyone else seems to agree with? And I guess like I'm hating on something everyone else seems to agree with.
Look at this. Full circle, aren't we? Full circle.
Full circle.
Well, it happened. Oscar turned 50. You know, half a century ago, nobody dared imagine he'd have such a birthday party. Nobody but film people. Because the essence of our arts and sciences are dreams and hopes and faith in the future. That's why half a century is only a beginning. Just want you to know, if the Academy wants me back here in another half century, I'm available. And thank you. And here's the way we all feel about you.
The 50th Academy Awards were held on April 3rd, 1978 at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles, California. And Bob Hope once again hosted the event. For the 15th time, he was the master of ceremonies, and he was the sole MC as he had been the last 8 years. It was the first time since 1967 that the show had only one MC, and this marks Bob Hope's 19th time being a part of hosting the Academy Awards. The 50th Oscars marked the golden anniversary, and the event was treated with a sense of history and celebration. The ceremony included special tributes and retrospectives on the past 5 decades of Oscar history, highlighting the evolution of cinema. The 50th Academy Awards became the longest Oscars telecast, running for 3 hours and 40 minutes. This length was largely due to special tributes, retrospectives, and many awards and performances. Ben, any overall thoughts about what I just read, the 50th Academy Awards, some people that maybe showed up that we can maybe highlight?
I think one of the coolest things, 'cause I want to be able to talk about the winners themselves, is the design of the stage. And I don't know if you noticed the stairs that they use in the stage. On it has all the Best Picture winners, has Best Actor, actresses, like everyone who's like won an Oscar is like on these stairs that I don't know if like you would really notice at first, but it was kind of cool to see like 50 years later to see some of the names of the earlier films like placard on there.
Yeah.
Because for us in the time it's another like almost 50 years since the 50th Academy Awards, and we're almost at 100. Wow. And so at the time to think of like at the 50th, what are they feeling about the first, the second, the third like Academy Awards? Like there's such a like that gap is so wide, and I almost wonder like how many of like, because like Mary Pickford's name was like on the stairs, like is Mary Pickford alive at this point? I'm gonna do a quick little like search, but like that like shows like how much of like a time jump and difference there was. So she actually died in 79, so 2 years after that she's gone, and that so like those 50 years feels small to us in this perspective because we're so far away from it, but also like it's so huge in and of itself. So much time has happened.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, we do see, as a throwback to the first Best Picture winner, we see Janet Gaynor, who was in Sunrise, and she presents the Best Actress, and that's a huge kind of moment of tying it all back in, which is a really cool little like tidbit and nod. There is also some protesting again at the 50th Academy Awards that we'll also be talking about. Yeah. And of course, Bob Hope. How do you feel about seeing Bob Hope now? He's older than he's ever been. And
can we just get him to like host the Oscars like this upcoming year? Like,
you imagine?
Let's get an AI Bob Hope.
And introducing AI Bob Hope.
It'll be like Bob, but spelled with like an A and an I in it. It's some like weird way. I mean, I don't know. Just embrace the future, John. Soon they'll be AI worthy, and it's going to be fascinating.
No, it's like they use someone with like that, face changing thing that they use in these movies, whatever that technology is. But then they have to do it like live because they're live broadcasts, so it doesn't really work that great.
Like motion capture.
Yeah, so like at certain points it just like breaks and you just see the real actor's face, and you're like, oh God, who is that? It's like Robert Downey Jr.
Well, if they pay him $100 million, we'll
only $100 million.
Jesus. All right, let's get to it because this is a really fun moment, I thought, which is the Special Achievement Awards. So it was presented by Mark Hamill, C-3PO, and R2-D2, the trio of trios, if you would, in our world. So first one was given out to Frank Warner for sound effects editing in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And then another one went to Ben Burt for the creation of the alien, creature, and robot voices in Star Wars. So both space alien movies, coming at the same time, unique in their own ways. But for me, like Ben Burt, like that he wasn't included in the other sound designers. He got his own Special Achievement Award. I thought it was like pretty unique and cool. What do you think of that moment on the stage and giving out these achievement awards?
Yeah, it was really sweet. I just kept trying to like bring my brain back as someone who like loves Star Wars, and we've been alive for like way less time than it's been around, but yet we still both love it so much. It's so funny to just think about like this being one of the movies that's been nominated for Best Pictures. It's just one of the songs that you just hear played in the background, but it just so happens to be Star Wars and one of the most like iconic songs of all time in film entertainment. And then you have these like iconic characters on stage, and everyone's like, "Oh, like they're so cute." And it's like, yeah, we've seen these people now for like 50 years. It's insane. Like, these characters are like
cute.
They're still adorable, but they're still just like arched in cinema now forever. And I just kept thinking about that the whole time. Like, that's fascinating. And yeah, it's so well earned and deserved. And it's nice that this being the 50th Academy Awards, it's like so packed with so many different things. And they give a lot of achievements out that they didn't have to, but it's a cool little nod to these like other categories that they probably would have never won in.
Yeah, and I think it's just the idea of like sound effects editing, which now we've combined Best Sound again of recent. Of like, it's important to recognize like what other people do. It's like sound is like so unique to like the design, how it gets made, how it's mixed. It's like a lot of more people are involved in the process. So it's cool that like, you know, that we're starting to see the separation of getting shouted out this way.
Next is the Irving G. Thalberg Memorial Award went to Walter Mirisch. For his consistent production of high-quality motion pictures, Mirisch was a highly successful film producer known for his work on several critically acclaimed, commercially successful films, including Some Like It Hot from '59, West Side Story from '61, and In the Heat of the Night from 1967.
The Gene Herschel Humanitarian Award went to Charlton Heston for his humanitarian efforts and his work within the film industry beyond acting. Heston was known for his strong social conscience and involvement in various causes, including civil rights. He marched alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and was active in advocating for the rights of others. He also served as president of the Screen Actors Guild, where he worked to improve working conditions for actors.
And finally, the Academy Honorary Award went to Margaret Booth for her exceptional contributions to film editing, and she was a pioneering editor in Hollywood known for her meticulous work and long-lasting influence on the industry.
All right, moving on to the competitive awards of the evening. We first have Best Visual Effects. This one went to Star Wars, to John Steers, John Dykstra, Richard Edlin, Grant McCune, and Robert Blaylock. So all of them had unique contributions to the visual effects. So first, Steers, this is a second Academy Award. He previously won for Thunderball in '65. This is Dykstra's first of 2 Oscars. He would go on to win for Spider-Man 2. This is Edlin's first of 2 Oscars as well. He would go on to receive 2 Special Achievement Oscars. And then this is McCune and Blaylock's only Academy Award win. So all of them contributed in many different ways to ILM, Industrial Light, and Magic. John, I think that visual effects is like what makes Star Wars so unique in and of itself, and like why it stood out, because it was like, how the fuck did they do that in space?
Absolutely. I mean, the flying scenes alone, which are taken from, the old classic films of jet fighting pilots in World War II, and then kind of brought to life now in a futuristic sci-fi space, and the epic explosions now, now looking at them, it's like we just don't appreciate it as much. But really just thinking about that time and looking at all these other films and trying to watch, 60 sci-fi films, even some of the 70 sci-fi films, it's just like, wow, like crazy the step that Star Wars really took and brought it to the next level. And even like the small special effects, it's like the small little things like the blaster bullets and the different like gear and weapons that like people have. Obviously lightsabers is like an astonishing thing to see on camera for the first time. It's like you'll never forget that moment as a kid where you like see your first lightsaber. I think it's the reason why most kids are interested in Star Wars at first. And it's just an iconic piece of cinema. It's an iconic prop of cinema,
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think just the lightsaber is like, whoa, like that is meticulous. Having put that together as a visual effects to me, that stands out of like anything they could have done, including just, I mean, these guys changed the industry with Lucas, because with Defied, Industrial Light, and Magic, there's so many advancements to visual effects technology and filmmaking that is like at the forefront today. Like, without these guys, we don't have most of the shit that we have today.
Yeah, no, it definitely changed a lot, and it like continually progressed throughout the series, which is so cool to see that they really learned so much from this movie and then continue on to like continue to advance visual effects in the industry. It's awesome. Best film editing went to Star Wars. Paul Hirsch, Marsha Lucas, and Richard Chew. This is Hirsch, Lucas, and Chew's first Academy Award win. And then we have a cute little quote from Marsha Lucas where she said, "If the audience doesn't cheer when Han Solo comes in at the last second in the Millennium Falcon to help Luke when he's being chased by Darth Vader, the picture doesn't work." So a lot of people credit her as basically changing Star Wars, taking Star Wars to like the next level. Saving Star Wars, exactly. And she chopped this bad boy up and made it such a faster, quicker, more entertaining science fiction film. And I've watched, I forget the name of the documentary, maybe it's just a behind the scenes like mini doc they did about her. And it was all about like how much she's changed, and it was small things because it's editing, right? Like small little scenes that got cut that were about the droids, but maybe the droids aren't like progressing the plot right now. It doesn't have to be a fun little goofy side bit. We can chop that out, and that's like just a small reference of what she did. There's so much that she did to kind of like change and make this movie what we know now as Star Wars. So anything you want to say about the film editing of the great Star Wars?
Yeah, I mean, from all I've heard is that like the movie was saved in post, especially with Marsha, stepping in. One of her biggest contributions was the battle over Yavin, and putting that together and slicing up, which is where we get that quote from, and how she felt like that, how crucial it was to build that anticipation. And when Han Solo, gets Darth Vader, it's like this moment that's like kind of sucks the breath out. You're like, oh my God, wait, they did it. They're going to do this. It's like that kind of tension that it was so many different shots that you had to balance it, and very well done. So it truly was saved in post, because it seems like as great as of a visionary Lucas was, he seemed way in over his head with like what he thought he could deliver. And that was just because of like it's all new. Like they're creating everything specifically for this movie to make it work. Moving on to best cinematography, this one went to Close Encounters of the Third Kind to Vilmos Zsigmond. This is Zsigmond's first and only Academy Award win. His other nominated works include The Deer Hunter in 1978, The River in 1984, and The Black Dahlia in 2006. Fascinating. Don't have Annie Hall in cinematography. Don't have Star Wars here in cinematography. But Close Encounters of the Third Kind, pretty iconic looking film.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe the biggest upset for a lot of people, if it's not Star Wars Annie Hall, it's probably going to be Close Encounters of the Third Kind, just not being nominated. Best art direction went to Star Wars. Art direction by John Barry, Norman Reynolds, and Leslie Dilley. Set direction by Roger Christian. This is Barry, Reynolds, Dilley, and Christian's first Academy Award win. I mean, come on. It's always so hard.
What else is there to say?
Yeah, it's always just so hard to like comment on something that's like, oh, we're going to talk about the art direction of Star Wars. Like, there's a cool Star spaceship, laser guns, lightsaber. It's like, come on. Everyone's talked about Star Wars to like the nth degree. It's so hard. What else is there to say, Ben?
Nothing. What, like, how else are you gonna create all those planets? Can't be on Earth.
Yeah, they shot that off Earth, bro.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy how they got the Tatooine. Insane.
It's like, why can't we do that again?
I mean, they did. They did it in episode 5,
I forgot,
6, and then 1, 2, and 3.
They left the cameras there. I totally forgot.
Yeah, they just kept rolling. Best costume design went to Star Wars, to John Molo. This is Molo's first of 2 Academy Award wins, and he would go on to win for the 1982 Best Picture winner, Gandhi. So I was really fascinated by this aspect of the nominations, which was there was no Annie Hall nomination yet. Diane Keaton essentially changed women's fashion for the 70s, and maybe for all time with what she was wearing. So I'm just a little curious, like maybe like why wasn't that in there for a nomination? Maybe there really is an explanation, but I just thought it was interesting just to point out.
No, I think you should point that out. I have no idea why that's the case. This is the same costume designer, Ruth Morley, that went to go on and do Superman and movies like Ghost or Tootsie. Like, all have iconic costumes in them. All are like known for also having like iconic fashion as well. So it is odd, but maybe that's just how this film has also influenced cultures, the fashion, and that's just gotten carried on for years and years, and just us, now in 2024 are just hearing about that as the main aspect now of what people talk about when it's Annie Hall. Best sound went to Star Wars, Don McDougall, Ray West, Bob Minkler, and Derek Ball. This is McDougall, West, Minkler, and Ball's first Academy Award win. And it's interesting that Ben Burt was not a part of the winners, but received a Special Achievement Award. Any idea why you think that happened? Just it was such a big part of it.
Yeah. I guess so, but to me it's just so like, why wouldn't he be a part of it? Because these guys all contributed almost in the same way that he did, but I don't know. I don't make the rules. Maybe they couldn't fit 5 of them on there. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it just
seems a little fishy.
Yeah, it's bizarre. Maybe there was just some aspect of those sound effects editing that he did that they wanted to highlight him specifically. That's something that probably there's got to be something else in there. Like maybe he did something beyond what we know.
They were able to like comprehend.
Yeah, we can't even comprehend his sound editing, dude.
Can't
even feel it.
Moving on to Best Original Song, it went to You Light Up My Life from You Light Up My Life, music and lyrics by Joseph Brooks. As many expected, Joseph Brooks won the Best Original Song this year. It was the most popular song in the country for several months. However, the Oscar was only the last of many awards for the song, which also received a Grammy and a Golden Globe. The award was presented by Fred Astaire, who was also greeted with a standing ovation. So, John, let's listen to You Light Up My Life.
But now you've come along, and you light up my life. You give me hope to carry on. You light up my
Wow, John, I can't believe they actually wrote a song about us and how you light up my life.
I'm going to cry. That was so beautiful. The Best Original Song Score and its adaptation or adaptation score went to A Little Night Music, adaptation by Jonathan Tunick. This is Tunick's first Academy Award win, and Tunick is one of the 19 EGOT winners. And this Academy Award win was his first of the 4 major awards. Very cool.
Moving on to Best Original Score went to Star Wars, to John Williams. This is Williams' 3rd Academy Award win after previously winning for Fiddler on the Roof from 1971 and Jaws in 75. So Steven Spielberg, do you know John? Do you know him? Have you heard of Steven Spielberg before?
It's a hat trick.
So Spielberg recommended John Williams to George Lucas, who were friends. Williams delivered a grand symphonic score influenced by Gustav Holst's orchestral suite, The Planets, as well as Richard Strauss, Anton Dvorak, and Golden Age Hollywood composers Max Steiner and Eric Wolfgang Korngold were all influences on him to make the score. It was immensely successful and remains the highest grossing non-popular music recording of all time. And John, I did not realize this, and I don't know if you did either, that the Imperial March is never in the first movie. It appears in the second movie, in Empire Strikes Back.
Interesting.
Yeah, I found that out, like researching it up, and I was just like, what?
Yeah, that's definitely something I probably knew and then forgot. And now I'm learning again. That's fascinating.
But it's like so iconic and like synonymous. Like you would think, like, oh, when you see Vader, you hear the dun 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 dun. but you just don't. You don't in the movie, so it's really cool that they that he added that theme to it. That was just as iconic, and some of the movements within the Star Wars themes. Just to like take a second, it's so beautiful. Especially I love the endings to like Empire Strikes Back, like that music. Some of the music of Luke looking at the suns on Tatooine, just suns. Like the twin suns, like that French horn. Oh my god, it gives me such chills. It's beautiful.
I always love all the romantic music in Star Wars. All the couples, like Leia's song and Han and Leia's romantic song that they have together, and obviously the prequels did that as well, and continued that trend though of having great, romantic love songs. They're great.
Duel of Fates.
How about that?
God! Ever hear that?
God, we gotta stop.
we have to stop.
Best animated short film was presented by Mickey Mouse. That little crackhead came out. And I was like, "Hey guys, I'm 50. I look so young." And everyone was like, "Oh my God, Mickey, who let you out of your cage?" And then he killed that man and then went right back on stage and said the winner of Best Animated Short Film is The Sandcastle from Co. Hodman.
Best live action short film went to I'll Find a Way to Beverly Schaefer and Yuki Yoshida.
Best documentary short subject went to Gravity is My Enemy by John C. Joseph and Jan Stussy.
Best documentary feature went to Who Are the DeBolts and Where Do They Get 19 Kids to John Cordy. So I thought it was kind of interesting. So Dorothy and Bob DeBolt, they were an American couple who adopted 14 children. They're 12 at the start of filming, and some of whom are severely disabled war orphans. And they also raised another 5 biological children from Dorothy, and Bob DeBolt also had a biological daughter. So doing some crazy great work to like care for these people, to adopt all these children. Really endearing to see that. So I just want to give that a little shout out.
The best foreign language film went to Madame Rosa from France. And Madame Rosa tells the story of an elderly Jewish woman who survived the Holocaust and a former prostitute in Paris who cares for a number of children. The film's director, Moshe Mizrahi, became the first Israeli to win an Oscar.
Yeah, and even Mizrahi, like being Israeli, I think he was born in Egypt, but he identified as Israeli, moved there. So it's interesting because we will get to another aspect of this ceremony where, man, today's politics seem to never change. So moving on to best screenplay based on material from another medium went to Julia, to Alvin Sargent, based on the novel Pentimento by Lillian Hellman. So this is Sargent's first of 2 Oscar wins. He would go on to win for the 1980 Best Picture winner Ordinary People. And John, his other works include Paper Moon, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, and The Amazing Spider-Man.
Freaking epic, man. That guy knows more about Spider-Man than probably anyone out there.
Yeah, pretty wild. I figured you would enjoy this man's work.
Fine art the man's crafted. Best screenplay written directly for the screen based on factual material or on story material not previously published or produced. It's like they just keep tacking on words and more.
Just
words.
say original screenplay.
Just more.
Just say best original
more.
screenplay.
At this point, it's ridiculous. It's just a joke. And the winner is Annie Hall, Woody Allen, and Marshall Brickman. This is Allen's first of 3 Academy Award wins for Best Original Screenplay. His other screenplays are Hannah and Her Sisters and Midnight in Paris. This is Brickman's first and only Academy Award win. Allen has more Screenwriting Academy Award nominations than any other writer, all in the Best Original Screenplay category. So, since we didn't talk much about Brickman, I wanted to read this quote from Woody Allen on Woody Allen, which is a book he co-wrote all about his life and has interviews and other stuff about his career and some of the films he made. But I wanted to read this little Q&A that's at the back. And the question was, Annie Hall, like Sleeper, was written by you and Marshall Brickman. Who is he? Is he a writer by profession? And then he goes on to say, Marshall and I used to appear in a cabaret together. He was with a musical act, he played the bass and the guitar, and we got friendly, and we used to talk. And then we decided we would try and write something together for fun. So we wrote, and we liked it. We wrote Sleeper and then Annie Hall and then Manhattan together. I liked him. He's been a friend and very nice. He's also directed several films. One, I just thought it was odd, just what a weird, simple little answer that was. And also, I love when creators get pulled into like filmmaking and maybe they have no experience, but I think Brickman is what adds so much of like the nuance in this movie. And obviously Woody Allen probably wrote a lot of Alvy, but I think Annie Hall is a lot of a deeper, more emotional character, and maybe that's because of Brickman. And we get all these different like personalities and perspectives when it comes to the people they date, the interviews that he has with random people in the streets. You get a lot of different people's like perspectives, and I just don't feel like this is a movie that could have been written by one person. It like really needed more than one voice to like capture New York basically in the way that they do in this movie. So just wanted to shout out Brickman because I didn't mention him.
Best Supporting Actress went to Vanessa Redgrave for Julia as Julia. So this is Redgrave's first Academy Award win. In total, she was nominated 6 times for either Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress Oscar. So prior to the ceremony, Vanessa Redgrave's Best Supporting Actress nomination was met with some controversy due to her recent involvement with The Palestinian, which was a documentary chronicling the activities of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. So the film garnered controversy from several Jewish groups for its anti-Israel commentary. After paying tribute to writer Lillian Hellman and the titular character of Julia, which Redgrave won the award for, she remarked in her acceptance speech, "And I salute you, and I pay tribute to you, and I think you should be very proud that in the last few weeks you've stood firm, and you have refused to be intimidated by the threats of a small bunch of Zionist hoodlums." She concluded her speech stating, "I salute you, and I thank you, and I pledge to you that I will continue to fight against anti-Semitism and fascism." So the comments received both applause and booing amongst the audience. Later during the ceremony, Paddy Chayefsky, screenwriter, prefaced his presentation of the Screenplay Award saying, "I would like to suggest to Ms. Redgrave that her winning an Academy Award is not a pivotal moment in history, does not require a proclamation, and a simple thank you would have sufficed." And several hundred members of the Militant Jewish Defense League picketed the Los Angeles Music Center where the ceremony was held because of Miss Redgrave's involvement in the documentary The Palestinian, which caused a lot of controversy. I mean, this is a controversy that has persisted through time, that we are still dealing with today. Gotta be honest, I don't think she said anything like that crazy, because she is saying that she's like fighting against anti-Semitism and fascism. It's sometimes, I don't know, I don't want to get too political, but the Zionist movement is what she is like commenting on and not commenting on Jewish people. So it's interesting that Chayefsky gets to go out there and diminish a woman's perspective, saying you could have just said thank you and that would have just been enough. Very Alvy Singer of him.
Oh, a little callback with Chayefsky and Alvy Singer. Oh, Alvy, I don't know. I wouldn't go that far, but I like the little dig. I appreciate the wit that you had in that one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very touchy subject, like with this protest going on, but it's sort of like, it's interesting how like in today's world it's still a persistent topic and
conversation. It's unbelievable how just relevant this is to what's going on right now, and just how how is this still not gone away? It's interesting, and
how the reactions to it is still the same.
Yeah. And obviously we've talked about, John Wayne interrupting the ceremony because he didn't want, yelling from the sidelines. And we've seen other people kind of bring politics and turn their speeches into moments. So it's also like just not true. It's like this just happened. What was that? I don't remember the film it was, but that was like 3 or 4 years ago at this point in time. It was for Godfather, right? So it was 1972. So that happened 5 years ago. And this man's going to come out and say that it's not like a pivotal moment in history. Like, clearly it is. Yeah. Like, clearly it has a massive audience and broadcast. Anything you say will be remembered. Obviously, like, it seems crazy. I don't know. Best Supporting Actor went to Jason Robards for Juliet. This is Robards' second consecutive win for Best Supporting Actor after previously winning for All the President's Men in 1976. And Robart is one of the 8 actors to win multiple supporting actor Oscars and is the only one to win them consecutively. Julia was a film directed by legendary Fredman Zinnemann. Robards made it the 7th performer to win an Oscar for a Fred Zinnemann film. This list includes Ivan Yandel, received the Juvenile Academy Award for The Search in 1948. Gary Cooper received Best Actor for High Noon in 1952. Frank Sinatra won Best Supporting Actor from Here to Eternity in 1953. Donna Reed won for the same film in 1953. Paul Scofield won Best Actor for A Man for All Seasons in 1966. And now Vanessa Redgrave just won for Best Supporting Actress for Julia. So, Ben, one, we both didn't watch this movie. And what I will say about this movie, since I haven't watched it, I've enjoyed. I did not like A Man for All Seasons when it comes to Worthy, that's for sure, compared to all the other films. I do like From Here to Eternity, even though it's not like on my top 10 so far of Worthy. I love High Noon. I went to go watch this movie. So if you've never used this great site, I'm going to blow your mind if you don't know what this is, but go to justwatch.com. If you're looking for something, anything, you can search on justwatch.com and it'll tell you where it's streaming, maybe where you can buy it, where you can rent it. There's 2 movies this year on the Best Picture nominees that were not on anything. You can't buy them, you can't rent them. Literally, you can only get Julia right now in 720p DVD if you find it on eBay or Goodwill. That is the only way you can watch Julia. I have found on a sketchy Russian streaming website where they have Julia. Why do they have Julia? I'm not quite sure, but it's like 240p. I got 30 minutes in and I said, this is like not even watching the movie because it's in 240p. I can't do this. So that is my short little rant on what the hell is going on. How is a filmmaker of this caliber not have any sort of like way to watch this movie? It's so sad.
It's a big shame. Film preservation, you would think, would be very important still.
For Zinnemann?
You would think.
What is going on? How does he not have like a film collection out? There must be something with like the studios or his estate.
It has to.
Yeah.
It has to be something with the studios, and the 70s is a messy time. It feels like for a lot of films.
Yeah, because this is not the only film. There is another film, The Turning Point, since I'm on the topic. You could not get that anywhere. I watched the whole thing on that Russian sketchy streaming site that I told you, again, in like 360p. It was a little higher quality. But it's just ridiculous. You couldn't rent it anywhere. You can't buy it anywhere. Just a DVD that you had to find somewhere out there in the wilderness.
Yeah, that's insane. Moving on to Best Actress. This went to Diane Keaton for Annie Hall as Annie Hall. So the award was presented by Janet Gaynor, who appeared in the very first Best Picture winner, or one of the 2 Best Picture winners, Sunrise, the other one being Wings, as we very well know on this journey of Worthy. So this is Keaton's first Oscar win and first of 4 nominations for Best Actress. Her other nominated performances include Reds in 81, Marvin's Room in 96, and Something's Gotta Give in 2003. Film critic Molly Haskell wrote, Keaton took me by surprise in Annie Hall. Here she blossomed into something more than just another kooky dame. She put the finishing touches on a type, the anti-goddess, the golden shiksha, from the provinces who looks cool and together, who looks as if she must have a date on Saturday night, but has only to open her mouth or gulp or dart spastically sideways to reveal herself as the insecure bungler she is, as complete a social disaster in her own way as Alan's horny West Side intellectual in Annie Hall. Another aspect to Keaton's performance is her eccentric wardrobe in Annie Hall, which consisted mainly of vintage men's clothing, including neckties, vests, baggy pants, and fedora hats, and it made her an unlikely fashion icon in the late 1970s. A small amount of the clothing seen in the film came from Keaton herself, who was already known for her tomboyish clothing styles year before, Annie Hall, and Ruth Morley, who designed the film's costumes. Soon after the film's release, men's clothing and pantsuits became popular attire for women. John, is there anything you have to add about Diane Keaton and her Oscar-winning performance as Annie Hall?
No, really, I just want to like highlight that quote again, that she is so messy I love that aspect about her. I think it's like another thing that makes this movie feel real is that she's not like, ooh, she's the daughter of the rich mayor and she's like pitch perfect and she's just annoyed because she doesn't like his personality. It's like we've seen that a million times. She's different, she's unique, she like likes this guy, and then we see them like fall out of love. It's like it's so interesting and well deserved, and it's why I gave her the worthy too. Come on, boy.
This is true.
Best actor went to Richard Dreyfuss for The Goodbye Girl as Elliot Garfield. This is Richard Dreyfuss' first Academy Award win out of 2 career nominations, and he was later nominated for Best Actor in Mr. Holland's Opus from 1995. For his portrayal of a struggling actor in The Goodbye Girl, becoming the youngest actor to do so at the age of 30 years and 125 days old, besting Marlon Brando, who won his first Oscar in 1955 at the age of 30 years old at 360 days. This record stood for 25 years until it was broken in 2003 by Adrian Brody, who was 3 weeks shy of age 30 at the time of the 75th Academy Awards. Dreyfuss is still, however, the shortest to have ever won Best Actor, standing at about 5'4" and 1/4 inches tall. My short king, Mr. Richard Dreyfuss. Ben, I told you to watch this movie like a month ago. I told you gotta watch this. If you watch any of the movies, you gotta watch The Goodbye Girl, because you're going to be shooting yourself when you watch this movie because you don't like Annie Hall. And you're like, we've seen this before. And I think this is a great movie. I love Richard Dreyfuss in this movie. I think this is so well deserved. And Woody Allen is here as our boy, Alvy. Your best friend, Alvy Singer. You got John Travolta here for Saturday Night Fever. Insane. Just bananas.
I think the fact that just Chewbacca is not nominated is just
oh my God.
The biggest travesty.
So, Ben, what I will say is that you need to watch The Goodbye Girl. Like I said, you're going to shoot yourself because it is The Goodbye Girl, if you haven't seen it, is like a combination of It Happened One Night, our Best Picture winner, and I'll say like Paper Moon, like a great young child performance and like a family duo child performance. And mix that into a rom-com formula, like It Happened One Night, and you have The Goodbye Girl. It is so damn adorable. It's the classic, like, will they, won't they? The two people hate each other. It's like your classic, like, sitcom romance or your It Happened One Night classic modern romantic comedy. But it's heightened because of the performance. Richard Dreyfuss is so damn funny in this movie. And I know, Ben, you're just going to watch this movie and just say, like, this is such a better comedy. Like, he is such a more interesting character. Like, and he's an actor in the movie. And it's just, like, it's so similar to Annie Hall in a lot of ways. But for me, I think it kind of, like, highlights that it's really well made. It's good. But it's not like new enough in the way that Annie Hall and Alvy is in showing perspective and like changing the way the movie is by doing all the crazy things that happens in Annie Hall. I think that The Goodbye Girl is like your straightforward romantic comedy, and it's super funny. I was laughing like throughout the entire movie, and has an amazing child performance by Quinn Cummings. She is so good, maybe one of the best like children's performances I've ever seen, like hands down. I might just say it's probably the best I've ever seen. And then her mother, Marsha, played by Marsha Mason. A great film. Go check it out. And it's an interesting comparison to Annie Hall. They're both romantic comedies. But I think it, like I said, highlights Annie Hall in the way it kind of progresses and brings that hyper-focused reality and perspective to it.
Moving on to Best Director, went to Woody Allen for Annie Hall. This is Allen's second Academy Award of the evening, which he previously won for Best Original Screenplay, because I'm just going to call it Best Original Screenplay, or whatever that load of garbage it was actually called, for Annie Hall. So with this film, Woody Allen becomes the first person to give an Oscar-nominated performance in a film which he had won Best Director for. Woody Allen has been nominated 7 times for Best Director throughout his career. And I found this quote from Woody Allen, who famously never really shows up to the Oscars. The only time he did it was in 2002 when he was talking about New York City and imploring people to still film there after 9/11. So he said this quote in 74. Woody Allen said, "The whole concept of awards is silly. I cannot abide by the judgment of other people because if you accept it when they say you deserve an award, then you have to accept it when they say you don't." What do you think of that, John? Because that just like is kind of the crux of this whole podcast.
You're like, finally, I can say something about this man that's going to piss John off. No, I mean, I think we both agree. It is kind of silly. But at the same time, I love a list. Come on. Who doesn't love a list?
Who doesn't love a list?
At the end of the day, what we're talking about here is a glorified list, okay? I don't think I've ever really put it this way, but the Oscars, award shows, it's just a list. What's the list of the best movies this year? Who do you think are the best performances, technical aspects? It's like, it is silly. It's ridiculous, but it's also so fun, and it's great to like use as a vehicle, like the way we do here in Worthy, to explore cinema and explore the past. So, yeah, it's silly, but I love it. We love it, and we ain't gonna stop.
They ain't stopping until we're 92.
I imagine the way you've talked about Woody Allen this whole podcast, and you see the name George Lucas, Fred Zinnemann, Steven Spielberg, Herbert Ross, don't know him that well, but probably some great films under that man's belt too, right? How you feeling about that list right there, Ben?
Yeah, George Lucas really should have just won. I don't know. I just throw my hands up because I think the argument is there for Lucas, for the way it changed everything, what he created, his vision. Pulled it off, regardless of like how many people had to help to do it. I don't know what that man could have done more, and I think it's like one of those like travesties almost in a way that George Lucas wasn't sort of like, hey man, thank you for doing what you did. Just gonna say it like that because Woody Allen gets a lot of love. He's gotten a lot of love throughout his career from the Oscars in a very weird way, and George Lucas put a lot of heart and soul into making Star Wars to a point where he almost is like done directing movies just because he became so involved with like the creation of other aspects of filmmaking. So it's really hard to be like, how did George Lucas not win director for that? Well, especially considering he won 6 technical awards. The only technical award it didn't win was cinematography. I mean, come on.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think George Lucas should have won for Star Wars for Best Director. I mean, it's an iconic franchise, as we now know. And as much as we said it was maybe saved in the editing and had all these great people behind it that aren't George Lucas, the man is the person who tried to bring it all together and is continued to expand it and continue to grow it as a franchise. So it's also, like you said, like very visionary, as much as I think Woody Allen's Annie Hall is. It's just in a very different way. And maybe we're just seeing like a shift in the Academy, especially in like what they're looking for, and moving away from anything that's not like a more focused perspective or more closer to like a narrative that they find more like respectable, maybe pretentious, some might call it. And finally, here we are, Ben. The best picture of 1977. The nominees are The Turning Point, Star Wars, Julia, The Goodbye Girl, and the winner of the 50th Academy Awards is Annie Hall, produced by Charles H. Jaffe, and this is Jaffe's first Oscar nomination and win. So, Ben, we've talked so much about why it should have been this, why it should have been that. We talked about how your opinion differs greatly about Annie Hall, about Woody Allen, than mine does. But I want to learn more about the stats. I want to learn about what other people are saying about Annie Hall. What are some percentages? What do you got for me, brother?
All right. So Annie Hall, Rotten Tomatoes has a 97% with an average Rotten Tomatoes rating of 9.07. The top critic percentage is a 96 with an average top critic rating of 9.1. The audience score is a 92 with an average rating of 4.4. IMDb, it has an 8 flat. On Metacritic, it is a 92. And it won 4 Academy Awards out of 5 nominations, barely missing the big 5 because Woody Allen did not win for Best Actor. So, John, we got to rate it. Got to give it our numbers. What did you give Annie Hall?
I gave Annie Hall a 90 out of 100.
Okay.
I love this movie. For reference, Sound of Music is a 90. Rocky is a 95. The Godfather is a 98. Just some reference for things around there. I love Annie Hall. Like I said, I think it is very unique. I think it inspired me a lot when I was younger. I didn't talk too negatively about the movie because I think you filled that gap in that space, this podcast. So the things that I don't think fully worked, there is some aspects of the cinematography. Love Gordon Willis. Don't shoot the podcaster, but there's some weirdly dark scenes in this movie that I'm like, it's just pretty cool shot in New York, but it's like maybe like definitely doesn't look exposed properly. Like looks like a little bit too dark, and some things where I'm like, okay, we could have done a little bit more interesting aspects of it. And I do think the story could have been like a tad bit punched up more. I think like the final ending to our film could have been like a little more dramatic. But I do appreciate just like the vision of him, like someone in the diner just looking out at the couple as they just kind of see each other, maybe for the last time ever, most likely. It is kind of like potent and beautiful. But Ben, what did you give Annie Hall?
So, I should be no surprise, I did not give it a very favorable grade. I really can't sugarcoat it. I gave it a 64. To me, it's just like I gotta give it a failing grade. It does not pass. But the technical stuff, I said I appreciate it. I can't appreciate, so it's like it saves it. But I hate Alvy so much. And gotta be honest, I don't love Annie that much either. I think she's kind of as much of a fucking weirdo as him, and just like somebody who's like so desperate trying to fit in, but like don't really know why. You don't really get too much about her because fuck the women and their perspectives, really. Yeah, and I know we talked about art versus artist, and that influence really does impact me a little bit with thinking about this, and so I didn't want to give it the GG, like giving it like a 20. I don't want to be disrespectful.
Wait, can you go through your lowest, please? Because this is so low that you have to.
Like my lowest all time, or just lowest?
Yes.
Okay.
It's 50th anniversary. Come on.
Okay, so 64. So it sits 1 point below All the King's Men, which I gave a 65. We know how much I love that one. Other movies that are just below Annie Hall, we have Mrs. Miniver and Cavalcade. We have My Fair Lady at a 50. We have Cimarron at a 45. The Greatest Show on Earth, which I like. Do I like The Greatest Show on Earth more than I like Annie Hall? Maybe.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
Especially the documentary movie. The Life of Emile Zola is pretty low. Around the World in 80 Days, I give it 30. The Broadway Melody at 25, and Gigi at 15. So it's just like, it's just not for me. And I tried really hard to like look past so much of it, but yeah, it's pretty low for me, and it like ends a run of movies that were pretty great for me. I mean, we went from Midnight Cowboy. Patton was a little low, but then we had French Connection, The Godfather, The Sting, Godfather Part 2, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Rocky, and then Annie Hall. And it really does stick out to me like a sore thumb because it's like so different compared to like pretty much every other movie that won Best Picture. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. And then, I mean, I guess, John, let's answer the question now. Is Annie Hall worthy of the Best Picture award of 1977?
I think worthy. I think Annie Hall is worthy of the 50th Best Picture winner. I definitely think Annie Hall is worthy. I've already explained it heavily, but the way I truly feel like is that I love Star Wars. I love Star Wars a lot. And I'm not even sure like when I've watched Star Wars, which is funny because, we were born in the 90s. So when was my first interaction with Star Wars? I don't really know. I don't like have a story of someone showing it to me. I don't really know when the first time I watched it. I really doubt the first time I watched Star Wars was the original Star Wars. So my fondness from Star Wars doesn't like draw directly from the original movie. I love the original movie. I mean, I've seen these movies so many times. I love the series so much, and I would never like talk negatively like about the original Star Wars. Like, but what I will say is that I do think this movie hits me personally. Annie Hall, like I really related to this. Like I said when I was younger, like I really loved this movie, and the movie's changed for me. And I love that when movies over time like change perspective, and I feel differently about them as I age. And you realize like, oh damn, like I'm less like that person than I thought I was, or like, ooh, I don't want to be like that person. That's even worse. So I have a personal attachment to it as well. I love the fourth wall breaking. It's always like been something I've been super interested in. I've always thought that was really funny when characters do that, and I love the perspective driven films in general. Like I love when you just focus on someone's unique point of view and you just like are brought into this world, and then all of a sudden you're like just out of it instantly. I always found that super interesting, and I do think this movie is like unique and different enough. And the way it's told, it's not like technically so different, in the way it's like created, shot, sound, and things like that. But I definitely think it's unique in the way it's written. It feels very unique in the way the characters speak is very unique. The characters are very detailed. Like, you have to say that like Annie Hall and Alvy are like way more deep of characters than Han, Leia, and Luke. I love Han, Leia, and Luke. They're iconic characters, but like, who do you know more about by the end of each film? And I'm not saying that is the reason why I like one better than the other, but I think that does prove a point that like you get so much more out of these characters, and you get a lot more out of the story and the interactions than you do from Star Wars. And I'm not saying like you get more out of it as an experience, it's more fun, but there's a lot more to mine there. There's a lot more like texture and information about the world and the people than you do get in Star Wars. I think that's just like accurate. But Ben, I don't want to take up all the time here in the world. I love Star Wars is what I'll wrap it up in saying. I truly think it's amazing. I know it's changed cinema forever, but I love Annie Hall. It means a lot to me, and I think it has changed Hollywood enough to be recognized. And to me, honestly, I think about Rocky, and I think this movie is kind of similar in Rocky in the way it like focuses on this person and like this perspective of like, let's bring you down to the gritty streets of Philadelphia, and it's like, here's Rocky. This is his story. This is who he is. We're in, we're out, basically. So I kind of think about it that way for the Academy, and maybe that's why they chose it. But what are your thoughts?
So I don't think it's worthy. I really do sit here and think like Star Wars was very much robbed of a Best Picture win. I find that the influence of Star Wars is too immense to overlook. It was the biggest movie ever at the time of its release, changed everything, became a cultural phenomenon, made stars out of nobodies, instantly. It's like really hard to like sit there and not and deny that, more so than like Annie Hall ultimately to me is just like fine. Don't think it does anything that like that like Star Wars does to like change everything. And like that's like where I sit on the spectrum of it, of just like there's such a massive technical achievement that was done, and I find the characters and the world that gets built is able to tell a complete story. You're able to get so much out of it. And like, just because it's not real, because it's not human, doesn't make it, to me, any less important to like understanding yourself and to understanding your place in this world. It's a grand story, you know, with Star Wars, that to me is just so undeniable. When putting it all together and making sense of it, it's just always stuck out to me of just like, how did that not win? How did like it win all these other awards, but it's like robbed of like kind of this like special recognition? And I'm just like left with like a lot of like questions, because it's like there's nothing that I've seen online looking up through Annie Hall that's like, this is why. But you know, everyone points to just like, well, it was human, it was like different. It's just like, but is that enough to like really change it? Because we look at like some other, like The Godfather part, you know, 1 and 2, huge like for its time. So it's like there's precedent. You know, you have Lawrence of Arabia, you have Ben-Hur, you know, Bridge on the River Kwai. You have these like humongous movies that have been made before Star Wars that were recognized. But Star Wars, the $300 million movie at its time, biggest box office movie of the year, and it's like it's not getting that. So it just feels very like, I wonder what happened. I wonder how the voting breakdown actually happened. Was it, you know, I saw a quote about how a lot of New Yorkers were like so amazed by like Annie Hall that it was like, well, you had to like be a New Yorker to understand, because New Yorkers are like a huge voting base within the Academy, to like that swing the vote enough versus like the George Lucas, California, and USC's, you know, graduates of the world who are like starting to infiltrate the Hollywood system in California at this time. So it's a mystery to me. I don't want the takeaway from this is as just like I'm just like such a pure hater, but because I just think it's like a fine movie that like I think is, to me, is just doesn't match what I think should be like honored as like a Best Picture winner. So yeah, Annie Hall, it's not worthy to win Best Picture for me.
I understand. I totally understand. It like brought really, especially being the 50th anniversary too, it brought back like, what is a Best Picture, and what's a Best Picture to like me, or what's a Best Picture to the general audience, and then what's like specifically the Best Picture of the Academy, and how everyone looks at it differently. And there's like so many things to look into thinking about like why something may have been chosen. I think you could look at the categories of Best Actor, Best Actress. They were both different films. So clearly you have a large audience who are interested in those two movies because they like those two actresses. They've given those the 2 awards. And then you have Best Actress, Best Actor, and then Best Supporting Actress, or 2 different roles or 2 different films. So you already have like a split between the categories. And then you get to the final awards, and it goes to Annie Hall. So it brought me back to like the huge debate, Star Wars and Annie Hall. General public, is it the popularity of Star Wars, how it's so accessible and anyone from any culture or even language can understand it, memorability? And I think people like look at those 2 things as being like essential for Best Picture, where it's like, oh, no one remembers that, why was it chosen for Best Picture? It's like, well, that's not why. No one can look at something in time and be like, I know this is going to be remembered 10 years 20 years and plus from now. You know, you can't define that. So that should, I'm not saying you're doing this, but I'm just defining it in general. Like that can't be a even any sort of pillar of how you define a Best Picture, in my opinion, because yes, it should change maybe filmmaking or how it's done, but in terms of popularity and like accessibility and like does the general audience remember it, that I don't think really should qualify. I think really at the end of the day, it should be like what you personally think is the best achievement in filmmaking. Well, then you have the Academy, who's like, well, we're looking at innovation, how you're changing it, but it's also storytelling innovation. It's technical innovation. And I think those 2 things get split so evenly for both of these movies. And then overall filmmaking achievement, that's basic, like just general, you're making a good movie with great aesthetic and understanding of technical like filmmaking. Okay. Of course you would want that in a Best Picture. That goes without saying. But yeah, I think it comes back down to the voting process. I feel like a lot of people got split. There was a lot of people that maybe were like, ew, Star Wars, that's not my cinema, you know, in the film industry. I'm not saying that was like a big argument in the general public. Obviously not. It was a huge film, but you could totally see people seeing CGI, not CGI, but special effects to that degree and being like, can we just go back to like shooting guns and blowing up cars? Like, I don't want this, you know? Old Hollywood. I mean, think about John Wayne. John Wayne gave out this award. I thought about that too. Did John Wayne like Annie Hall? Did he like even Star Wars? Did he even watch either of these two movies? And that's how I'm going to end it for me, Ben.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good points you made there, and it's to think about where we started with the Wings, Sunrise, like that debate. I mean, Star Wars is Wings in many ways. I won't taint Sunrise calling it Annie Hall. But, you know, kind of the idea is there of that the art versus the artistic film versus the big production. But it just feels like this big production movie is so influential and so important that it just feels a little bit robbed. It's like, it is just like truly amazing to me, like that didn't win. But it's just how it is. It's how it all, you know, panned out. And honestly, if it had won Best Picture, I think we would still be on the first scenes of the movie by this point of the discussion. John, it's the 50th episode. We've done, more than 50, but in terms of this main series, we've done 50. It's pretty unreal that we got through this 50 and we have less than 50 now to catch up to Oppenheimer. So we'll see how far we can get until there's another Best Picture that gets named. Yeah, man. It's been a pleasure. It's been a good ride so far.
Yeah, man. I can't believe it's been 50 episodes. Worthy is like a shark, you know. We just got to keep moving forward, or we're gonna die.
Yeah, fish are friends, not food.
Exactly, and it's the 50th anniversary, so I might as well say we've been doing this for 4 years. You know.
Yeah.
If I die or you die, like on air now, I'm gonna say it. Like we got to keep going. I don't know if we do it alone. I say we just have to find someone. We
build an AI bot, AI worthy, and then they just ask all the questions, to be like, what would Ben say about this movie? And then just spits it all out.
Okay. Deal. Like a digital handshake for that. And if we're both dead, we'll just tell everyone around us to do that for us.
Yeah, just like
if we don't finish, especially.
I mean, I think it's pretty easy. We just take all the audio, upload it to some AI, and then just recreate it.
Definitely.
Yeah,
absolutely. ChatGPT can do that.
Yeah, please, we can do this.
Easy peasy.
In 100 years, people will still be able to access us. Anyways, thank you for listening to 50 episodes of Worthy. I'm Ben,
and I'm John. And this is Worthy.
After that, it got pretty late, and we both had to go, but it was great seeing Annie again. I realized what a terrific person she was, and how much fun it was just knowing her. And I thought of that old joke, this guy goes to a psychiatrist and says, Doc, my brother's crazy. He thinks he's a chicken. And the doctor says, well, why don't you turn him in? And the guy says, I would, but I need the eggs. Well, I guess that's pretty much now how I feel about relationships. They're totally irrational and crazy and absurd, but I guess we keep going through it because most of us need the eggs.
Thanks for listening to Worthy, the breakdown of every Best Picture winner from past to present. Listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on Instagram at Worthy Podcast, on Twitter at Worthy Pod, and on Facebook at Worthy Podcast. Any inquiries can be submitted to worthysubmissions@gmail.com. That's worthysubmissions@gmail.com.